if Dave lets me. There you go. So this isn't like super fancy or anything, but can everybody see my screen? So we have our sponsors that we'd like to thank. So we have Western Environmental Equipment Company, we have Aquatic Informatics, we have AA Sales, which is also Shire, or they're working together. We have Endura, Swift Comply, also All Pro, and then B-Haul Contracting. So thank you to all of our sponsors. We appreciate everything that you're doing, and we're looking forward to some of the presentations that they'll be giving. We have a couple of 15-minute sponsor presentations that are scattered throughout with some good content, so we're looking forward to that. Okay, so I'll have this up, but I'm going to go through a couple of things. I'm Chelsea. I'm the current chair for the Pretreatment Committee, and I'm going to kind of go through like our sort of pretreatment board because everybody's put in some good work to get this workshop going. So those who are part of our exec team, make sure your camera's on and so you get recognized. So we have Jolene from Flagstaff, who is our vice chair. And we have Ashley Pinnell from Buckeye, who is our secretary. And they both have done a lot of work. We have Chris, who is from Fountain Hills. He's our outreach. And then we have Dave Nye, who's our workshop chair. Or I guess, like, yeah, I guess technically your title is like workshop subcommittee chair. And Dave has helped put on this workshop. I mean, he's done the bulk of the work, in my opinion. He helps procure all of our speakers and put together this fabulous workbook, which everybody should have got. I believe Shanna sent that out. So if you haven't gotten it, let me know. But in either way, you'll be able to get that content at least after. But Dave put together the workbook and all the presenters and just kind of got everything geared up for this workshop, these 2-day workshops. So we're very grateful to him. So that is our team. And then I already went through our sponsors. So this is towards the end of the year for our committee. So we have one more meeting left for those who are interested in attending that meeting. We've been having WebEx meetings since the end of the year. Oh, Dave just let me know that GHD is also a sponsor. They aren't on this page because they were added recently, but shout out to GHD as another sponsor. So our last committee meeting for the year is going to be December 6th on a Monday. We decided to change our meeting dates to Mondays because that tends to be not as busy of a day for everyone. For a while, for the longest time, we've had our meetings on Wednesdays, but it seems like everybody schedules meetings on Wednesdays. So we want to see if that will allow for more people to participate. So our meeting will be December 6th. It's posted on the AZ Water page. So if you go to azwater.org, and then if you go to committees, environmental, pretreatment, then you'll get to our page. And then if you scroll down to our events, you'll be able to see, be able to register and see the time and everything, and then our WebEx link. The workbook would have been emailed. I can check with Sheena. I believe she might still be on this call, or I'll email her just to make sure. That should have been emailed. So I will check. It was, hopefully. Okay. So make sure to attend our last meeting and register for that. It's free. We just need, AZ Water or staff at azwater.org. Okay, I'll make sure that she sends that out again just to ensure everybody got that. So for our last meeting, we are going to have elections. So that will entail voting on, let's see, our new, well, potentially a new secretary, outreach coordinator, and workshop subcommittee chair. Jolene will be promoted to chair, and then I'll be the past chair. So if you are interested in running for any of the positions, oh, sorry, I'm just looking at the chat too. If you're interested in running for any of the positions or becoming more involved, please email myself or Jolene, and we will kind of compile a list, and then possibly we'll send out a survey when it gets closer so that people can vote for who they'd like to see in the positions. So please, oh, thank you. So please let us know, and we'd love to have more people involved in planning and just, you know, getting good content for the committee, because information sharing is kind of a big part of AZ Water. So excited about that. So put that on your calendars. If you're on our mailing list, Ashley should be sending out kind of a placeholder invite and with the WebEx information for that. So
Hey,
this,
Chelsea?
yeah.
I just want to let everybody know I put the PDF in the chat in case they didn't get it through the email. That way you can access it before we start today. If you don't know where the chat is, it's a little conversation bubble. Click that and it brings up the chat.
I just clicked it and you probably saw that my screen changed, so it works. So sorry about that if you if people didn't get that workbook in advance. I think, you know, there's always like a mad rush right before a workshop or anything, so we appreciate your understanding. Okay, so as you've probably noticed, there is a recording button happening. So the workshop today and tomorrow will be recorded. It's going to be trimmed because it started as soon as the team started, but once it's trimmed and kind of edited up, then those will be posted for anybody who registered so that they can access an on-demand version. So this will allow, if you've, you know, if for some reason you had to leave early, or if you had to take a break or something came up, because I know pretreatment is always kind of a crazy business and there's always something that comes up. So if you want to like review or listen to the recordings, that will be available shortly after this, probably sometime in the next couple of weeks, just to allow Shayna time to edit. But that will be available. So if you reach out, we'll let you know, hey, we're still working on it. But that will be a nice resource if you, even if you attend both days, but you just want to review some more of the material, that will be available. What else? Okay, so we're planning, I know this is a year in advance, but we are planning that next year we will have an in-person workshop again, and that will be at Mesa Convention Center. We have a contract with them and everything will be good to go for then. I mean, as good as it can be. So just look forward to that. We'll probably be blasting different blogs and posting about it. So if you'd like to be involved with the planning for all that, then just keep following us and attend the meetings. So, okay, and then let me stop sharing if I can figure that out. And then we should have Brandy on the line, but I'm not sure if I see her. Just hang tight really quick. Maybe Dave, if you want to share the slideshow again, and I'm going to reach out and make sure that she is popping on.
And probably mention, well, one small thing that if during the presentations, if you make sure you stay muted until the end, if you can always put questions in the chat during the presentation and we'll make sure they get brought up at the end of the presenter's presentation, or probably unmute yourself, raise your hand. There's always that. If you'd rather voice your question instead of trying to type it all out, sometimes it's difficult to type a question. And if keep your video off. It helps with bandwidth. I know for some people there are issues with internet, and then it keeps the Teams meeting going smoothly. So just keep that in mind today. Thank you.
Okay, sorry for the wait. While we're trying to figure out if our Raising Water president is going to join, I think this would be a good time to do like a kind of a mini roundtable. So we had a question from one of our AZ Water or our Pretreatment FOG members about commercial inspections or like FOG type inspections. And for those of you who do this for your job, how many do you conduct a week? Or if you have like a set criteria, maybe over a month period, how many do you typically accomplish over that period of time? And if there's any specifics, like if you have to hit up a number of places, or does that include re-inspections or follow-ups? So if you'd like to put that in the chat, we are curious about your input there. Don't be shy. I know that there's probably FOG people on the line, so and you can put like if you're an inspector about how many that you do per week. I know it's going to vary. Dave, for your inspectors, is that all inspectors that you have in your team?
Yeah, that's the 3 inspectors that are out there. They typically do 5 a day. Could be
Okay.
more, could be less. Then we also do, stormwater and some other things, so.
Nice. Oops, I'm talking and I'm on mute. Great. So in the chat, it looks like we have John Finelli. They do 15 to 30 inspections a month. And then we have Ashley from Buckeye, who does about 10 a week. And then Crystal from Scottsdale. There's 4 inspectors who do about 60 inspections per week, but that includes stormwater. And then Aaron, 20 to 40 in a normal week between the two of us. So there's quite a diverse amount. I mean, it seems like you guys are definitely pumping out the inspections. Rodney, 1 fog inspector, about 2,000 accounts, about 200 inspections per month. Kurt, 5 a day is a good day. Follow-up inspections can eat up a lot of time. That is very true. So I know I currently don't do too many fog inspections. I'm more on the industrial pretreatment side, but when I did do them, like if we could get 5 done a day, that was like quick, if there weren't too many problems or if we didn't have a lot of follow-ups or anything. So that is a good point to make. Crystal, follow-ups for pump records drag us down. Yeah, that is another thing. Like if you have a good relationship with some of the pumpers and just like calling them sometimes, if, depending on the facility. Josh, but we have 1 inspector for fog. They do about 25 to 30 per month. That's a lot of follow-up for each, or there is a lot of follow-up. Yep, that's part of the job. 200 a month. Wow. Yeah, I was thinking, I'm like, that is a lot of inspections. Pima County typically inspect 5 to 6 new inspections per day. That seems like kind of about a typical amount. 20 to 30 between Calvert and Bryan. Let's see. We have Rodney, who approves all commercial permits, private lift stations, laundry, oil water separator. So it seems, I mean, I guess in the pretreatment field, we tend to have quite a bit of, well, we have people who do several different roles, and I guess oftentimes fog, they also do industrial, and we also have other like stormwater, backflow. It's kind of like everybody is a jack of all trades, I guess. Okay, we have, let's see. Let me check. I think, let's see, just checking our schedule. Oh, Rich, if you want to unmute and talk, you can. I see your hands up.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to say that through Linko and the Linko software, I have these kind of conversations all over the country, and it seems like the average for a dedicated fog inspector is somewhere between 5 and 10 inspections per day, depending on the technology and some of the techniques used. And one of the things that's nice to kind of have a baseline number there so that you can really look at allocating resources appropriately for your fog program. Because the other thing that I talk about or ask about, I guess, is those follow-up inspections that a lot of folks in the chat have brought up. And we find that, and I'd love to, hear from the participants what sort of percentage they see, if they're keeping track of that, on follow-ups. So generally, we're seeing as a sort of baseline number, and depending, and there is a lot of dependencies on the maturity of the FOG program, somewhere around 30% of inspections need some kind of follow-up. So, if you factor the follow-ups into your daily schedule, that's a lot of inspections and a lot of things to do after the inspections to make sure that the facilities are following the expectations and ordinances. So I just wanted to throw out some general numbers there and see if there's other discussion around maybe the follow-ups and how frequently folks are seeing that. Thanks.
Thanks, Rich. I don't know if anybody wants to put kind of some more comments in the chat about that. Well, while we think about that, the meeting chat is muted. That's weird. I don't know how to fix that. Okay, never mind. Okay, so since Brandy, I'm not sure what happened. Oh, here we go. Sergio put follow-ups, enforcement, new business, all these. Yeah, I think for most inspectors, there tends to be a lot of different parts moving throughout the day and different things that kind of contribute to our workload and time. So these are all definitely things that we see here too. I'm just going to give some quick updates for AZ Water. Just a reminder, I believe the abstracts were due earlier this month. There was like an extension. Normally they're due at the end of October, but I think they left it open for a little longer. But I believe that window has closed. So for the annual workshop that AZ Water, or annual conference that AZ Water puts on typically in April, the abstract window just closed. Hopefully there were some good pretreatment submissions. So sometime early next year is when typically people are notified if they will be speakers, but the planning goes on throughout the year. So let me pull up the webpage really quick. Just share. And since we have a little bit of time until Josh pops on, I'll show you kind of familiarize with our webpage, since this is kind of where everything happens for AZ Water. So if you see, we have, let me scroll over here. So we have our 95th annual conference and exhibition. So AZ Water has been around for quite a long time. I'm sure when we get to our 100th year, there's going to be a big celebration. So our conference will be April 12th through 14th, and they're going to have it in person. The last 2 years have been virtual. I believe this year was in April and it was all virtual, and then the previous year it was bumped to October due to in-person needed to be canceled and rescheduled. So that was like their first virtual in October of 2020. This year was in April about the same time. And then next year we're going to have it in person again, finally. So that will be at the Convention Center, the South Building as usual. So just stay tuned if you are interested in attending. There's always really good presentations. There's the exhibition hall and all kinds of good networking opportunities. So just stay tuned on that. If you're an AZ Water member, you should be getting the emails on that. Also, just showing you our committee page. So if you want to know where we keep all of our information updated, if you go to committees, go to environmental, we have pretreatment, and then this is me. So if you go to our page, we have our vision, our mission, goals, strategies. This is all kind of like what all the committees have on their pages. And then some announcements that we have, like, look here, we have our workshop, and then our next meeting. And then we have our board, and then any other upcoming events. So if you want to stay posted on that, we try and send out alerts through the portal on here, and it gets sent to your email. Oh, Jolene put AZ Water is also taking signups for volunteers at the annual conference. So if you want to attend, you might, and you're not sure if you can like afford it, or you just want to help out, you get, I think you get free admission, or you get free registration for the day that you're volunteering. So that's always a plus. And I think you get like a training and they feed you. So, hey, it's a way to get involved and kind of experience the conference. So without further ado, we have Josh. Let me stop sharing.
And I have his intro whenever you are ready. So we shall begin with Josh Valentine, who's going to do the Pretreatment Basics. So Josh is Brown & Caldwell's National Pretreatment Technical Lead and focuses his time supporting pretreatment programs of all sizes across the nation. He previously managed the City of Memphis Pretreatment Program, one of the largest programs in the country with over 100 SIUs. He also worked for several years as a contractor for EPA Region 9 Pretreatment Program and EPA Headquarters National Pretreatment Program. He also holds a wastewater operator's license in Arizona and Tennessee. Without further ado, welcome Josh. And go ahead and do your presentation.
Thanks, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. So I am I'm dropping a chat into the chat box. What I'd like to see is just kind of in general, how many years experience does the group here have in pretreatment? So just drop in the number of years that you've specifically been working in the pretreatment, whether it's for a program or as a consultant or at the state or federal level. Just throw that in there so we can get an idea of kind of what the group looks like. So we have a pretty wide variety, and so this is relatively common. It seems like most of the time when we do these types of presentations, there's a lot of people with less experience than more experience. So 5 years or less typically is where we see the most people. So it looks like we're kind of right in that, ranging anywhere from just a few months to I think somebody had 20 or 30 years. So that's great. I hope that with this presentation that you, even though it's kind of geared towards the basics of pretreatment and kind of pretreatment 101, I hope that everyone's able to take something away from this. So let's hop right into it. Feel free at any point to drop some chat, and if you have any questions, just drop it in the chat, and or feel free to interrupt me. I hope this is pretty informal. We can answer questions as we go, and also at the end there should be a little bit of time. So let's get started. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Cuyahoga River fires, but prior to the Clean Water Act actually being established and passed by Congress, there was a lot of there were several fires on the Cuyahoga River right in the Cleveland, Ohio area where they lacked proper wastewater disposal regulations, and so a lot of those industrial facilities in that area were just discharging straight into the Cuyahoga River, and so it was actually kind of coined once as one of the most polluted rivers in the country. I think there were a total of about 13 fires that started sometime around the late 1800s all the way up into the late 1960s, and so the fire that you're seeing here was, I think, was one of the last fires and was essentially caused by an oil slick that was present on the river. And so this was just kind of a, not that they weren't already moving forward with environmental regulations, but this is really kind of a true turning point for Congress to realize and understand that that the environment is very important, and that we need to protect it, and we need to do something about it from a regulatory perspective. So this really helped establish the EPA prior to the EPA being actually established by Congress. And so with that, the Clean Water Act essentially sets up the MPDS program, which, if you're not familiar with that term, it stands for National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. I feel like they could have came up with a little bit easier word to say or phrase, but that's what we got. And ultimately, it was kind of designed to, as it simply states, to eliminate pollutants from waters of the United States. And so with that, we also got the federal pretreatment program. And so the federal pretreatment program is essentially charged with establishing rules and regulations that help prevent Cuyahoga River fires, right? Help prevent incidents that negatively impact the environment, but also negatively impact the wastewater treatment system as a whole. So the collection system, the workers, the equipment, the treatment plant itself, any potential opportunities for reuse or recycling wastewaters or sludges or biogas, whatever those may be. The pretreatment program is essentially designed to prevent pollutants from being introduced into the treatment works or the publicly owned treatment works that would interfere or that would cause interference or cause pass-through. So that's essentially the objectives of the National Pretreatment Program. So why do we have pretreatment? So here's just a few images of why we need treatment. This was a picture that I took up in Pennsylvania when I was doing some work there one time. We drove across this bridge, and this is what we saw. And we did a little bit of research and found out that these were sediments on the bottom of the river caused by acid mine drainage. As you can see in this picture, you can see some flames. I got one of them circled here. You can see flames shooting up out of manholes. And I apologize, I don't know the backstory of this one, but I thought it was a very intriguing picture that's somewhat relevant to what we're trying to prevent. This is downstream of a pulp and paper mill where I was involved in an enforcement case where they discharged pulp paper fibers, essentially just solids, down the sewer with inadequate pretreatment. They essentially overloaded their treatment system, which was a DAF unit, dissolved air flotation, and the result of that was just an overload of solids into the collection system. And this is what that looked like. It took several days to vector and jet this line to get it to where it would actually flow again. This is foam at a wastewater treatment plant. I don't recommend anyone ever go and stand in the foam at the wastewater treatment plant, but this does periodically occur at treatment plants. A lot of times can be caused by industrial users. When I managed the City of Memphis's pretreatment program, we had a soap and shampoo manufacturing facility in town that routinely would try and do, well, they wouldn't try, they would do it. They would discharge off-spec products without any approval, without any treatment or defoamers added. And this is what this is not the Memphis wastewater treatment plant, but this is essentially what it would wind up looking like once it got into the aeration basins. And if you're familiar with, I have young kids and they like to take bubble baths. If you pour bubble bath solution into a jacuzzi hot tub, it just continues to intensify and get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's essentially what happens in the aeration basin. It's just kind of like a big jacuzzi hot tub, right? And once you get those surfactants and bubbles in there, it really could become a problem at that point. So definitely something to watch for. And this is just a picture of a fish kill that I found on the internet. Essentially, that's kind of what we're trying to prevent from the receiving stream perspective. The last thing we want is for our receiving stream to wipe out all of the living life that lives there. So that would be an example of pass through for sure. And then finally, this is a picture of a collection of a cross section of a sewer line that had the entire bottom corroded out due to low pH discharges downstream of a industrial user. I believe this was a jelly manufacturer, if I'm not mistaken, and they used a lot of cleaning solutions that were acidic as well as caustic, high and low, but predominantly their wastewater was relatively low, and they just absolutely destroyed the downstream collection system. So what is pretreatment? Now I think we kind of understand why we need it. So kind of the next step is, what is it really? What do we do with respect to pretreatment? So pretreatment, just in general, the definition is the reduction of the amount of pollutants or the elimination of those pollutants, or it could even be taking that a step further, alteration of the nature of those pollutants. So maybe converting it into something different that's not so bad or detrimental in the wastewater before it's discharged or introduced into the publicly owned treatment work. So what we mean by that is essentially, it's treating your wastewater in some cases before it's discharged. It's maybe it's shipping some of these some of these wastes offsite for alternative disposal, because it just can't be handled very well from a treatment perspective on site. It doesn't do very well in the collection system. So that's another potential for pretreatment. But just in general, it's essentially eliminating, reducing, or altering the nature of that pollutant before it gets discharged into the collection system. So we talk about pretreatment. And so we have a whole program, essentially. Most of you, I think, probably a good portion of you work for a municipal pretreatment program, and you're essentially at the municipal level, just like the federal regulations kind of charge EPA with developing and implementing the program at the federal level. That essentially trickles down to us as municipal people to implement in most cases. There's a few caveats. I'll show you that in a minute, where the municipalities don't actually implement their own pretreatment programs. But in general, the vast majority of pretreatment programs are operated and implemented by the wastewater utility receiving that waste. So generally speaking, the federal regulations state that POTWs with a combined design flow of greater than 5 MGD, and you either receive wastewater that's subject to pretreatment standards, so essentially categorical wastewater, or essentially an SIU. So it could be categorical or non-categorical, but facilities that essentially meet that definition of a significant industrial user, or you receive pollutants which could pass through or interfere with the treatment plant, then by federal rule, you're required to develop and implement a pretreatment program. Now, I say that because there are some caveats to that rule, depending on how your state wants to implement their state program. So I'm in Tennessee, and in Tennessee, it doesn't matter what the size of the treatment plant is. If you have an SIU, the state is going to require you to develop a pretreatment program because the state does not have the staff or manpower to implement programs in non-approved municipalities. So there are circumstances where I've run across in different states where you maybe don't have 5 MGD, maybe you're 1 or 2 MGD, but because you have SIUs that are discharging to your treatment plant, the state's gone ahead and required you to develop a pretreatment program. So don't be shocked if you do have less than 5 MGD treatment plant and you're required to develop a pretreatment program, because that is relatively common. And then in some instances, the state will assume responsibility for that. And I think that's on this slide here. So when we talk about program delegation, the way it kind of works is EPA is kind of the overarching authority, and they develop the regulations from a federal perspective, and essentially pass that down to the state and to municipalities to implement those. So the state MPDS program is essentially that program that implements that. Now the states can adopt those regulations wholesale, or they can modify those and essentially make them more stringent. They have to be at least as stringent, but in a lot of cases they will make some modifications to that. For example, the state of Tennessee, for the most part, adopts them wholesale, except for the definitions of pass-through and interference. They don't require, the federal definition requires a MPDS permit violation, and in Tennessee they do not require pass-through and interference to require an MPDS permit violation, because their thoughts are, and I actually agree with this, that you can cause upsets and interfere the treatment plant and its operations without causing an actual permit violation, and that should be treated similarly to the definition of interference. So for what it's worth, that's kind of how the state programs work. Then they pass that on to municipalities in the form of an MPDS permit. So you're issued an MPDS permit. It has all these requirements that the wastewater treatment plant has to meet, but also in there's typically a section on pretreatment, and has all the requirements for your pretreatment program. Now, there are a couple scenarios where EPA may issue that permit directly and not the state. And I think there's a map coming up that'll delineate those states. But there are some states that do not have MPDS program delegation. So EPA, EPA regions typically assume that responsibility. Then from the MPDS permit, then ultimately requires pretreatment programs to be developed and implemented, and then ultimately they regulate those industrial users. And I kind of messed up here. I should have put another line, dotted line from the state MPDS program over to the industrial users, because there are some states, which we'll show here on this map, that do formally implement the pretreatment program on behalf of the municipality. So, for example, Nebraska, Mississippi, Alabama, Connecticut, and Vermont. If you work in any of those states, there is no such thing as a municipal pretreatment program. The states issue all the permits, they perform all the inspections, they develop all the local limits, and implement essentially all of the requirements of a pretreatment program. And then there are some states that you see in yellow that are approved for. They have approval for to issue MPDS permits, but they aren't approved to oversee and regulate pretreatment programs. And so in those, so like Nevada, for example, is one that would be close to you all, where the state doesn't have that delegation, and so EPA Region 9 ultimately regulates those pretreatment programs. Any questions at this point? Feel free to drop them in the chat, or unmute yourself and speak up.
Joshua, it doesn't look like there's anything in the chat for you.
Okay, thanks, appreciate it. So this here, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this. I just kind of wanted this slide deck to be kind of a place that you could go back and kind of use as a reference. So here basically what we have is the high points of all the federal regulations and where they're located. So 40 CFR Part 403 is from a municipal pretreatment program perspective is what regulates us or tells us what we have to go and do. So these are there are obviously more, there's 403.1 and 403.2 that I've left out. I've only included the ones that are typically referred to or used on a daily basis. But don't take this to mean that those other sections aren't important. They're just not ones that we typically use every single day in our jobs. So Just kind of the high points of these 403.3 is where the definitions reside. So when I define the word pretreatment, that comes straight out of 403.3. 403.5 and 6 are pretreatment standards. So prohibited discharges are in 403.5. That's where, you know, it essentially says thou shalt not discharge corrosive wastewaters. Thou shalt not discharge waste that would cause an obstruction to the collection system, things like that. And then 403.6 is where it actually requires us to or requires categorical industries to meet the categorical standards that are in I think it starts in 405 and goes through 471, I believe, off the top of my head. So as an example, I think metal finishing is by far the biggest category represented nationwide. That those regulations reside in 403. In 40 CFR Part 433. 403.8 is really a really important one from a programmatic perspective. It's essentially the location that requires you to develop the pretreatment program and essentially tells you how you have to implement your pretreatment program. So you have to develop permits. You have to develop a legal authority that gives you the authority to issue permits and has all these, essentially, it's not a checklist, but essentially has a checklist embedded in it of all the things that has to be in that legal authority, of all the things that have to be in that permit, the requirement to develop local limits, and the requirement to develop and implement an enforcement response plan, the requirement to fund and staff with qualified personnel your pretreatment program. So all of those are located in 403.8. If you are developing a program or if you're submitting a revision to that program, 403.9 has all of that information as to, you know, what you have to do from a program submission perspective for approval. It also talks about, I believe 403.9 no, that's 403.18. So 403.18 is the modification of an existing program. 403.9 is the submission for approval of essentially a new program. So most of you probably already have an approved program. So if you were to modify your local limits, for example, or your sewer use or pretreatment ordinance, however you refer to it, the information on that would be of how you submit that for review and approvals in 403.18. So, for example, it's going to define what is the difference in a substantial versus a non-substantial change. So I won't go into any more detail about this, but just so you know, these are kind of the locations of where all the federal regulations are, or the main regulations that we typically deal with on a daily basis. So when we talk about the municipalities or the pretreatment program's legal authority, these are the things that have to be in there, and they are detailed in 403.8. They tell us that our legal authority has to give us the authority to deny or condition the discharges from industrial facilities. They have to require that those discharges that they are permitted to discharge are compliant with all of the standards, both locally and federally. You have to have the legal authority to control those discharges through a permit, a control mechanism, or similar means. If there is a compliance schedule that's required, then you have to have the legal authority to make them comply with that compliance schedule. And kind of the last two really big ones, in my opinion, are you have to have the legal authority to inspect those facilities, to sample and monitor those facilities, to get on site at those facilities, survey them, and then ultimately, if they're not compliant, you have to have that legal authority to enforce against that. So, and you see kind of in parentheses there all of the citations for those. And I hope I'll go ahead and tell you, I did not double check every one of these, but I'm pretty sure that they're all right. So I apologize ahead of time if you go and look and it's not the exact location, but I assure you that it's really, really close if it's not the exact location. And then EPA actually does us a favor and makes it a little easy for us, at least the ones of us that are trying to develop new programs. They do have a model sewer use ordinance or pretreatment ordinance that you can use in your development of a program, and that's the link to that. I mean, it is used as a model or a guide. To me, it's kind of the starting point. I don't think that you should necessarily take it and adopt it with no changes whatsoever. I think that you know, you have to kind of make it your own a little bit, but just know that it's a good starting point at least. So then when we talk about the procedures, what programs are required to do, you know, we're required as pretreatment programs to first and foremost identify and locate all possible industrial users. And that's not just significant industrial users, that's all industrial users. Because we have to then make that determination of whether or not they are, you know, meet the definition or criteria of an SIU. And then that kind of puts them in a separate category. But we have to locate and identify them first and foremost. And then once we have identified them, we have to understand the character and volume of pollutants that they may discharge to the treatment plant. And so at that point, then we must notify them of any applicable standards that they must meet. And so typically speaking, for an SIU, that's done through the permitting mechanism. It's essentially requiring them to submit for and receive a permit before they discharge. And that essentially notifies them of their applicable pretreatment standards, because those standards are in the permit. Us as pretreatment programs, we have to then receive that analytical data and analyze it to make sure that they're in compliance. We have to conduct random sampling periodically. I think the federal regulations say that we as control authorities have to sample and inspect all of our SIUs annually, and in some cases it can be more frequent than that. So that's one thing to point out, is understand and know what your requirements are in either your approved program or in your MPDS permit, because I have run across some programs that require more frequent sampling and inspection of their significant industrial user than the federal definition. So I won't go through these all and read them all, but this is kind of these are all the requirements that are in 403.8 for pretreatment programs and the citations for where they're at. And then for control mechanisms, we are required and kind of charged with controlling those facilities through a permit. So we have to develop a permit template that has all of the requirements in it that the EPA tells us at a minimum has to be in there. And then we have to understand and know what the facilities are doing so we can apply the applicable standards for that facility. So for example, I just ran across a facility that makes that makes sandpaper, and the municipality that issued them a permit included the metal finishing limits in that permit, which is totally incorrect. So be aware that, you know, writing a permit, you have to understand what the facility is doing, what they're manufacturing, what service they're providing. So you know so you can make a determination of which limits are going to apply to those facilities. And then just to point out that with respect to control mechanisms or permits, these can be individual, or they could also be general permits. So back in 2005, when EPA published what's referred to as the streamlining regulations, they gave us some optional provisions that we could implement as long as we have those in our legal authority. And so one of those is general permits, where instead of issuing one single permit to each user, you could develop and issue one permit for a general classification of industry. So for example, and I'm not saying that you should do this, but I have heard of people that do this, is they've developed a general permit where there's one document that's the permit for all dental users, and then the dental facilities would then submit a notice of intent to seek coverage under that general permit. And ultimately that one permit covers any of those facilities that you approved to seek coverage under that permit. I've also seen it for water utilities that discharge like filter backwash water. I've seen that as well, but it's generally used for when you have a large number or multiple facilities that are all very similar or essentially identical to one another. So instead of issuing 10 permits to 10 different industries, you would issue one permit to 10 different industries. So it just helps from a the phrase streamlining, essentially what it does is it helps streamline, the amount of effort and time, minimize the amount of effort and time required to oversee and regulate those facilities. So who, as the pretreatment any questions or comments, feel free to hop in at any point and speak up or drop it in the chat. Who, as a pretreatment program, who are we required to permit? So by federal rule, we're required to permit all SIUs, which technically includes significant industrial users, which includes all categorical industrial users or CIUs. But I did break it out separately just because some municipalities lingo when they're referring to industrial users is SIUs and CIUs when I don't think that they intentionally mean SIUs. I think what they're referring to are non-categorical SIUs and then categorical SIUs. But I just want you to understand that we are required to permit categorical industries and all non-categorical significant industrial users. We also are required to permit any other facility that may violate a pretreatment standard. If you look at the definition of an SIU, they would ultimately wind up being an SIU. But there can be facilities that don't meet those typical criteria, like the 25,000 gallons per day, or the 5% of the loading or the volume, where they're not categorical. But maybe they just can't. They're not consistently compliant with local limits, and so for that matter, from that perspective, then you would be obligated to permit those facilities. We also do permit. There's some optional types of facilities. So I'm gonna throw this out there. Type it into the chat, if you will. How many of you permit other types of facilities other than SAUs, and what are those facilities? So, for example, some of them could be hospitals or dry cleaners or car washes, as an example, or maybe even hauled waste waste haulers. So drop those into the chat. Let me know what they are, just so I can kind of get an understanding of what types of other permits that you may issue. Yeah, food service establishments. I forgot about that. Yeah, that's definitely one that gets lumped in there. So a lot of times these will also be like auto mechanic shops. It's not the volumes that you're necessarily concerned about, but in a lot of times it'll be, just ensuring that they have proper oil water separation to make sure that used oil doesn't make its way into the sewer. And then also some groundwater remediation sites. That's another one that's relatively common, where groundwater may be contaminated and the state requires the owner to pump. Like a lot of times they call them pump and treat facilities. So they'll have just kind of a pretty small typically it's like a little skid loaded treatment plant that they just come and drop off of the back of a trailer and plumb it in and pump the groundwater up and treat it. And then a lot of times those treatment, the water from the treated water will get discharged either back into the groundwater, but sometimes they'll wind up actually discharging it to the wastewater treatment plant. So a lot of car washes, hospitals, waste haulers, restaurants, remediation sites, food manufacturing and bakeries. Yeah, Chelsea, for the high strength waste for sure. Hospitals, pet stores. That's interesting. The shampoo stations. I hadn't thought about that. We used to have a pet shampoo manufacturing facility in Memphis. It's no longer there, but when I ran their program, we had a facility that manufactured pet shampoo, and because they would manufacture like the medicated and like flea and tick shampoo, we actually wound up permitting them, if I remember correctly, as a pharmaceutical manufacturing facility because of the medication additives that they would add into that. Let's see what else. Hospitals, food, yeah. So that I think it's RV dumps. Yeah, that's another one that I've seen regulated. I forgot about those. That's a good thing. I also see periodically some regulating of food trucks, and really just more of the wastewater, the gray water that they're going to have that they need to get rid of. A lot of times they'll have on the truck a little mini grease trap, but it's somewhat similar to kind of an RV dump station in a lot of cases. So let's keep going. So as the pretreatment program, we're required to perform compliance monitoring. I spoke about this earlier, and I just want to point out, we're required to do this independent of any information provided from the industrial user. So this does periodically happen, and there are some ways to get around this, but generally speaking, you should take your own equipment out there, your own composite samplers, your own sample tubing, things like that, and install your own equipment that's separate and independent from theirs, and collect those samples. And I have seen where sometimes you'll use their equipment and you'll put a lock on it to make sure that they can't tamper with it in certain instances. And I think that there's some caveats for being able to use that equipment. But generally speaking, I think that first and foremost, you should try to use your own, just to ensure that it's independent of anything provided by the industrial user. These can be announced or unannounced. I typically try to always recommend unannounced initially, but then I know that there's certain circumstances where you kind of need to do announced inspections or sampling events, just because one, maybe it's really difficult to get on site to these facilities. Maybe it's a Department of Defense, a DoD site that requires a lot of security clearances prior to even being able to get on site. Things like that, are kind of caveats to the rule, but just in general, you should try to do unannounced, just so they can't make any changes prior to you coming on site. They need to be independent or in conjunction with a client, a compliance inspection. But typically speaking, the compliance inspection is different than the compliance sampling event. So we want to make sure and delineate between those two. Just be aware of that. When we talk about compliance sampling, typically we're going to do a couple different types of sampling events. These could be time proportional composite samples. As you see there, that's an old ISCO 3700 series where we were collecting some wastewater samples. That's actually at a wastewater plant, but the time proportional. One thing I want to point out is that the intervals or the aliquots that are collected are really set at a specific time interval. So you may collect a sample every 15 minutes or every 5 minutes. It's going to pull that sample and composite that into a container. Whereas a 24-hour flow proportional composite sample is going to, instead of that interval being time, the interval is going to be sampled based on the volume that they discharge. So, for example, they may discharge, you may collect an individual aliquot or a sample every 5,000 gallons of discharge over the course of a 24-hour time frame. So, generally, so definitely specifically, the 24-hour flow proportional samples are more representative and are the requirement for industries to sample. But there is an option of time proportional sampling in the federal regulations where you can show or justify or rationalize that it's just as proportional or accurate as flow proportional sampling. So just be aware of that typically speaking, your industry should be doing 24-hour flow composite and not time composite samples, unless you've approved that and documented that in their file. We also do a series of grab samples in a lot of cases. There's 6 parameters that require us to collect grabs. Those are listed there, oil and grease being one of them, pH being one of them. There's actually a couple more. I think temperature is one that we have to collect and sample instantaneously. So those are parameters that ultimately you could impact the validity of the results by capturing them in a composite sample. So, for example, oil and grease. The idea of oil and grease is that you essentially, dip the container down through the waste stream, capturing kind of the top, mid, and middle layer of the waste profile. And if we were to capture that with a composite sample, if the tube's setting on the bottom, well, it's not going to capture any oil because the oil is going to be floating on top, unless it's just extremely turbulent flow. But even then, it's not necessarily going to be representative. And it could also, if we are capturing some oil, that oil could kind of stick to and solidify onto the actual sample tubing, just like it does in the sewer system. So that's an example of why we have to capture some of these as a grab sample. It's typically recommended that you do that with a series of grab samples and not just one grab sample over a 24-hour period. So maybe capturing maybe a minimum of 4 grab samples to essentially to get a composite sample with a series of grab samples. And there's some language in 403.12 G3 that describes that. And I'll actually type that into the chat because that's one that you should probably be familiar with and read through a little bit. 403.12 G3. Composite flow proportional. I'll just go ahead and tell you, flow proportional sampling may be the most difficult thing that you will ever try and attempt to do as a pretreatment program. As Christy's saying, it can be virtually impossible in certain circumstances. So I'm not going to go into my rant about flow proportional sampling, but I've tried to do it. I have done it, and it is extremely difficult. And it's just not. I don't think the people that wrote the federal regulations ever went out and collected flow proportional samples. I'll say that. I do want to show this though, and I'm sorry, it's a little bit blurry, but I tried to blow it up. This is a representation of the volumes discharged in an hour from a particular industry, and this is just supposed to be a graphic representation. This isn't actually their wastewater, but this is why we need flow proportional sampling. As you see, if we collect samples every 15 minutes, we're collecting 4 samples in this hour when they discharge by far the most volume, as they did, let's say, in this first hour where they discharged the least amount of volume. So essentially, we're saying that this flow is proportional to this flow, and that's not an accurate statement. And so that's why we typically try our best to collect flow proportional sampling where we can, but because the time proportional is not very accurate representation of the waste stream that's being discharged for facilities that have high variability in their flow. So just be aware of that. This is kind of why we want a visual representation of why we want to collect flow proportional samplings when there is high variability, just because we want to make sure that we sample appropriately, not the appropriate number of samples for this volume versus this volume here in the middle. Some sampling resources. There's the old I think it's 1982 manual on wastewater sampling and sample preservation. That's a pretty good manual. And then back in 2017, I think this is the last guidance manual. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe this is the last guidance manual that actually got issued by EPA. It came out in January 2017, and it's the Industrial User Inspection and Sampling Manual for POTWs, and it's a really good manual. I'm a little bit partial to it because I got to help when I was a contractor for EPA. I got to help help in the development of this manual. So a little partial to it personally, but it is a good manual. It's essentially an update from one of the previous manuals, but has a lot of really good information, both on it has a chapter dedicated to inspections, a chapter dedicated to sampling, and then has an appendix with a lot of great information in it as well. For example, how do you handle a situation where you collect a sample that's a violation and the industry does a split sample and it's not a violation? So there's a lot of good information in there in the form of the older EPA memos in the appendix. So go out, email me. I'll send you a copy of it in a PDF, or you can just pretty easily search EPA's website and download a copy of it for free. So I need to try and hurry up. I'm going to try and get through these a little bit quicker. I wanted to kind of go through the basics of pretreatment, then talk about sampling, and then talk about inspections. And so here this is literally at an industrial facility. It wasn't one that I inspected, but one that a colleague of mine had inspected and took a picture of it. And this was definitely an illegal discharge scenario. And this is why we go out and collect. This is why we go out and conduct compliance inspections, to make sure that the facilities are doing what they say they're doing, discharging where they say they're discharging, and discharging what they're supposed to be discharging. So it is just, I can't stress enough. I think that compliance inspections are probably, just in my personal opinion, the most important thing that you can go out and do at these facilities. And so we're required to conduct these surveillance as municipal programs. We're required to at least a minimum of annually go out and look at these facilities. Now, with some of the new streamlining regulations, for example, like non-significant categorical industrial user or middle tier categorical industrial user, which middle tier isn't used a whole lot, there's some reductions in the frequencies that you have to go out and perform these inspections. But essentially, we're wanting to walk through the production site. We're wanting to walk through the treatment plant area if they have any pretreatment on site. And I just want to point out, EPA has a Pretreatment 101 series that's really good and really great for entry-level staff and staff at any point in their career. Just as a refresher, but I can tell you, as a former manager, anytime I hired somebody, I made them, and they hated me for doing it, but I made them in their first week watch every one of the EPA Pretreatment 101 webinars that's on EPA's website. And so there's one on the procedures and how to conduct a compliance inspection. So feel free to go out and look at that. There's a recording of the webinar on EPA's website. So when we talk about monitoring frequencies, this is just for you to keep and have and to use. I have it broken down by whether or not they're an SIU or a CIU or a middle tier or a non-significant and this is something that winds up getting a little confusing. A CIU that has a monitoring waiver, there's still some. So like, for example, for pollutants not present, there are still requirements for the POTW to go out once a permit cycle and collect those samples. And so I have this kind of broken down, in kind of a matrix style format for you to use and just to have as a resource, just so you're familiar. So there's several more scenarios than one would typically think, but hopefully you can use this at some point and kind of help you understand what you're supposed to do for each different type of industrial user. So with those inspections, we kind of have two different styles. We have a scheduled inspection that we're going to do. That's our annual inspection. We're going to go out and do those every single year. We try to, again, we can do those announced or unannounced. And I understand reasons for doing both, but typically speaking, I strongly recommend at least to initially try the unannounced style. And then, if it's truly not feasible, then try the announced style. But I will say that a lot of times you'll get a little pushback. I've been the security guards that sit out front of these industries. Sometimes they feel like they are police officers on the SWAT team and special forces, and you know, you got to be understanding that they're just there doing their job. Their job is to keep people out of the facility. And so sometimes unannounced inspections throw them a little bit for a loop, and they aren't typically used to that. So just be aware that you know, you may have to be a little bit understanding and patient sometimes to get on site. But just know that, you know, unannounced inspection is really the way to go to ensure that they're not, you know, that they don't have any opportunity to make any changes prior to you getting there. So you can kind of get a true representation of what's occurring on what we think is a daily basis without them knowing that we're coming. And then the other style is on demand. So this is kind of different and separate from our scheduled kind of annual inspections. This is, you know, when we think that there's an issue or it's an emergency situation, or, you know, maybe I can't tell you how many times I've had disgruntled employees call us and tell us, hey, you know, industry ABC is doing, you know, XYZ, and you need to go check them out. And, you know, it was an employee that just got let go or just tired and frustrated of the things that they feel like they're doing that may be a little shady. So a lot of times you'll get some of those employees that'll, you know, anonymously call you and to tell you things that are maybe going on, not that you weren't aware of and that they probably shouldn't be doing. So that happens a relative, you know, amount, and just be aware of that, you know, take it with a grain of salt. You need to go and see it, lay your eyes on it, because a lot of times I found out that person's frustrated and mad, and it's really more hearsay than anything they've actually seen. And when you go out to the site and they start asking questions, you know, you start kind of peeling back the layers of the onion, and that person didn't have all the correct information, or you know, was just telling you what he'd heard somebody said. So just go in there, you know, with you know, transparency and trying to understand just what's going on, and not being biased to one side or the other. So with the inspections, I'm going to start trying to go through this a little bit quick, just to make sure that we get through all of it. But pre-inspection activities, kind of entry, and then once you're on site, kind of what we're going to do, and then the post-inspection work that we're going to do after we do the inspection. So before you go on site, I can't stress enough, read through their file, read through their permit, understand when their permit's coming up for renewal. Maybe you let them know, or maybe you carry them a permit application to complete and fill out. But kind of just let them know. I can't tell you how many, like these industries, they don't read their permits routinely, and in a lot of cases, if ever. And so part of being a pretreatment program inspector, you know, a pretreatment technician, pretreatment, you know, manager, permit writer, enforcement person, you know, whatever you're doing, a lot of times we're out there kind of as babysitters for these industries, and we're having to hold their hands and tell them everything that they have to do that's already in their permit that they should already know. So just know you're going to get frustrated. That's part of the job. And it just kind of is what it is. And I'll go ahead and apologize to you all for that, because if you haven't already experienced that, you will experience that sometime in the very near future. But read through the permit, understand, you know, what category that they're regulated under, if they're a categorical industry, understand what their average flows are from the facility, confirm whether or not they've had any, you know, recent or historical recurrence of violations. And then I always say, take the last inspection form with you, print it out, take a copy of it with you. You know, maybe if you have, if you're kind of in the digital age now, you can have those electronically on your tablet. But take those with you and review those. I've seen really good inspectors that go through the last inspection to make sure, you know, that's kind of the starting point. Well, last time we were here, you told me this. Are you still doing this, or have you started doing something different? That's really a good way of going about it. So once you get to the facility, you know, obviously you need to arrive at typically at normal business hours. Let's say in general. Now, I'm not going to say that you don't need to go on weekends or after hours, you know, non-day shift hours, because I think that you do for those 24-hour, you know, 365 days a year facilities. But you know, generally speaking, you need to arrive at normal business hours for those facilities, unless it's an emergency situation. you need to get on site to enter. And so a lot of times that's going to be, through a security guard of some sort. And then you need to just kind of immediately locate the person that you need to go and see. That may be their EHS manager, maybe the environmental manager, maybe the wastewater treatment operator, maybe it's the plant manager or the maintenance manager. It could be a whole plethora of different people. But you need to find the person that you're there to see and, go through and start the inspection process. In the event that you are denied entry, I think the first thing that you need to do is present your credentials. Say, hey, I'm Josh Ballantyne. I work for the city of so-and-so, and I am here on behalf of the city to inspect this facility, who holds a wastewater discharge permit that grants me the authority to come on site. And that, may or may not get you anywhere, and just very nicely, tactfully. I can't tell you, and I can't stress enough to not try and escalate the situation, because that just is a recipe for disaster. But tactfully discuss, if they deny you entry, why are they denying you entry? Why can't you get on site? Maybe they have a very valid reason. I've actually been to a prison facility out in California where we were doing an inspection out of prison. It was a high security prison. And while we were on site, we were getting ready to go in the door, and they rushed us into this totally different room after they got this radio call. And there was a riot in the prison at that moment. And all of a sudden, these like SWAT team guys start running in. And that was a very valid reason to deny us entry at that point in time, until they got that circumstance, under control. So just because you get denied entry doesn't mean that there's not a very valid reason. It could be a safety issue, which, typically speaking, these industries take safety very, very seriously, especially for somebody who's not even an employee of theirs to come on site. So just understand and try and gather why you're being denied entry, and record that information in a field notebook. And then I always say, immediately call your supervisor, let them know. They may try and call the plant manager or the EHS manager and try and figure out what's going on as well. Maybe they think, maybe the industry thinks those people have a little bit more authority and can get more information out of them. And then leave at that point if you're truly going to be not going to be allowed on site. And a lot of times, you'll see people recommend to go immediately downstream and collect some samples, grab samples if you can, just in the event that, the reason that you're being denied entry is because they're discharging something that they shouldn't be discharging. And maybe even do a perimeter walk around. One thing I'll talk about, as you enter the facility, even you could do a perimeter walk around before you go into the facility. Sometimes that's not actually feasible, just depending on the location of the site. But this was actually a picture at a biodiesel manufacturing facility where we did a perimeter walk around before we got on site. And what we saw was this oil that had spilled everywhere, all over the facility. You can't see them very well here. This is like oil absorbent kitty litter that they've kind of put out. They had these hay straw bales all around the perimeter, trying to keep it contained, but it was getting everywhere, leaving the facility, and wound up taking enforcement action for that, both from a pretreatment perspective, also from a stormwater contamination perspective. So good reason why we need to do those. Hey, Chelsea or anyone, just real quick, do I go until 9:15 or 9?
You have till 9:15, Josh.
Okay, perfect. So facility, perimeter walk around is a really good idea to do if it's feasible. And then also just kind of evaluate maybe some prior violations. Maybe you might not violations, but prior occurrences of something similar. So dead vegetation, odor issues, kind of things like that. I saw a facility one time that we got a call that they had discharged. It was another paper mill, and they had an overflow where all this paper fiber overflowed right next to a creek. Well, before we could get on site, they went and got a bobcat and just pushed it all into the river, and that was their way of fixing it. So just be aware that there could be issues that you could identify just walking around the facility before even stepping on site. Take an inspection form with you. I will tell you that as a former EPA auditor, if you don't have some documentation of some way of performing and conducting an inspection, most of the time you're not going to get credit for doing that inspection. You have to document that inspection. So an inspection form is a consistent way to do that every single time. Some people just do it with a filled notebook, and that is perfectly fine, as long as you're covering everything that you need to cover. I like the idea of a checklist or an inspection form because it teases you to ask certain questions. Kind of forces you. I had some inspectors that never wanted to go and look at chemical storage, and I intentionally put questions about their chemical storage area on our inspection form to force them to physically go there, lay eyes on it, and ask questions about it. I can't stress enough that an inspection form or some form of documentation of the inspection has to occur. And I think there's an example of that in that inspection manual. Maybe in the appendix, there's a template, I think. So some of the questions that you're gonna, ask just kind of in the pre-inspection or in the, I like to do a sit down with the people and ask several questions before we actually go out on site, because it may be loud, it may be difficult to hear, or hot and humid, and maybe it's your glasses are fogging up and it's hard to see and write. So I like to ask as many questions as I can up front before we actually go out on the floor. So number of employees, the shifts, water usage records. We use they're not necessarily super relevant to wastewater, but what they do is they give us an idea of, are they a growing industry? Are things changing? Are they losing people or shifts? That gives us an idea of when they may be discharging. If they were a 3-shift a day 24/7 facility, and now they're down to one shift, we can expect a totally different discharge pattern from those facilities, and maybe even a substantial reduction in volume. So sit down and ask as many questions as you can ahead of time before going out into the facility. And then once you get it, make sure you're wearing all the proper PPE. They'll typically tell you everything you have to have and can provide that to you in most cases. But make sure, from a safety perspective, make sure you got all the proper PPE. And some of the places that we're going to want to walk through are the manufacturing and truly operate, depends on the type of facility, but the operations manufacturing facility, maybe want to look at boiler blowdown. In some instances, like for example, battery manufacturing category requires that the showers and hand sinks is actually part of the categorical waste. So you may want to walk through the bathrooms or the shower, or because of the picture I showed you earlier, you may want to walk through every single restroom in the facility just to make sure they don't have some crazy 4-inch piece of PVC coming out the wall into the toilet. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are just some of the areas that you want to pay special attention to or ask specific questions about. Off-spec products, another good example of something that you need to ask about. If they're a manufacturing facility that makes some some chemical or some product, maybe even it's beer at a brewery, what do they do with that off-spec product? How do they get rid of it? How do they dispose of it? In a lot of cases, you're going to find out they discharge it to sewer. So just be aware of that, and make sure to do a thorough inspection. You really ask a lot of questions. Some of the things that we're looking for is housekeeping. I can't tell you how many times I've probably done. I have a general count. I think I've done around 500 inspections in my career, and I can't tell you how many times I can tell you when I first step foot in this facility if it's going to be a problematic facility or not, just by how well they maintain the premises, their housekeeping. I'm not saying that all dirty facilities are going to have problems. Because some manufacturing operations are just nasty and dirty. But I can tell you that generally speaking, the ones that have pretty major environmental violations typically have housekeeping issues as well. So that can be an indicator of something to look for. Look for dilution sources, just visible permit non-compliance. You'd be surprised how often you'll see some of that. And I think I have some pictures coming up where we'll see a few things. So here, just kind of in wrapping up, and feel free to drop any questions in the chat as we kind of walk through just some of these pictures. But this was kind of in closing. This was I really don't understand the design, but essentially it's kind of a settling tank, if you will, and so water's kind of flowing through it this direction, kind of overflows into each, and they capture solids and then leaves from the other end. But you can see all this white milky water. Well, that's wastewater. Essentially what they were doing was this is a force main that they're from a pump station, they're pumping into here at such a high velocity and volume that they just overwhelm this tiny little settling basin, and it just overflows directly into the floor, into a floor drain that goes directly to the sewer. So they wound up being non-compliant because they were essentially upsetting their own treatment system. This is a discharge that I took a picture of just as an example. This winds up being like the final monitoring point for a facility, and you got one waste stream coming in here, one waste stream coming in here. You got two pipes here, a pipe here, a pipe here, and I don't even know what this is. Maybe it's a way that they can pump out of this pit, but just be aware that sometimes the discharge locations, the monitoring locations, aren't some pristine sample box that just has one laminar flow waste stream coming into it. A lot of times it's going to be something more like this that's not all that easy to understand where all the wastewater is even coming from, and is it always the easiest location even for maybe a grab sample with all this grading that's over it. There's a little hole here, maybe a few holes here that you could put a bucket down in and get a sample, but it's not always ideal. This was that same biodiesel manufacturing facility that we actually caught discharging illegally wastewater, untreated wastewater, to a creek in the back. And so essentially this was their processing and treatment tank, and this was the discharge off of it. And what they did was, you can see grease running out of this line. They would connect these two pipes with a piece of this flexible hose, and then pump it to the back of the facility into a ditch. And so it actually went through this V-notch weir, and we collected samples of it. And here's what it looked like. These were the oil and grease samples. And this is the highest oil and grease concentration that I've ever seen from an industry. When we sent these off for analysis, they were 37,000 milligrams per liter concentration, which was obviously well over the 100 milligram per liter limit. So this is a paper mill that I inspected in I think this is actually in California. It was in California when I was doing some work out there, and their production had increased to a point that they couldn't keep up with the wastewater treatment. So they were treating their wastewater and doing a good job of treatment. They had very few violations, but they didn't have enough treatment capacity. And so what they were doing was putting all of their extra wastewater that they didn't have capacity for in all these drums and totes and storing it. And then on the weekends or on night shift when they weren't operating, trying to get caught up with all of this. I think we counted, it was like 37 or so totes of untreated wastewater just stored over here. You can see the paper, stored in here where they store their finished paper, just all over the place. No secondary containment whatsoever. So when you walk through these facilities and you see dozens and dozens of totes or drums lined up, ask them what's in it, because you may be surprised. This is at a commercial laundry, and this is a bar screen that used to be completely vertical, And because it had when we got there, they actually scraped it for us while we were there, but it had so much lint buildup on it that it literally bent the metal grating, and really, it was an obvious sign that they weren't maintaining their pretreatment system. So as kind of a wrap up, and I'll go through this pretty quick as kind of a post-inspection procedures. Make sure that you document that inspection. You can provide a copy to the industrial user if you want. You don't have to finish it on site. You can go back to the office, and depending on kind of what your city's or program's kind of policy is, you can typically, you can go back and type it up and do it in a neater format than kind of shorthand scribble on a piece of paper. But make sure and do that, and do it diligently. Don't wait a month and then go fill out your inspection form, because you'll forget things at that point. So, but definitely notify the industrial user of any deficiencies that you may have identified during the inspection, and then go ahead and schedule a follow-up with them. Hey, they need to install a new mixer pump for pH neutralization. We'll say, when are you going to have that by, and when's that going to be here? When are you going to get installed? And schedule, say, okay, I'm going to be here, the day that you're going to do the installation, to make sure that they do that. Follow up on that. Keep them honest. Keep them, diligent and kind of on their toes. That's all that I have. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you once again. I really enjoyed to be able to interact with this group with AZ Water, and unfortunately it wasn't in person, so I didn't get to see and meet you all. But I appreciate you all joining. Are there any questions or comments that you have about inspections or sampling, or just general pretreatment?
Well, Josh, it looks like there's a long comment question.
Yeah, let me try
and somebody's got their hand raised too.
Yeah, go ahead and ask. If somebody has their hand raised and wants to ask a question, go ahead and just ask that while I read through this.
Keith, go ahead and mute yourself, or I'll unmute you. Keith Schatzman, sorry if I mispronounced that. You can unmute yourself and ask the question if you want. I think you should be able to unmute yourself.
So while he's trying to figure that out, I'm going to talk about Diana's question and scenario. I actually just had a phone call yesterday, 2 days ago, about a very similar scenario where, and I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, I don't have the answer to this, because I think, so I have done a lot of research recently, and I feel free, anyone that can find it, send it to me. I cannot actually find a very good EPA definition of the word dilution. And so I in the scenario where an industry has two different waste streams that are going to be discharged to the sewer, being able to combine those two prior to discharge, I don't personally view that as dilution. But in the scenario of if it were categorical, you do have to take into consideration regulated versus unregulated waste streams. I'll just say this: my mental image of somebody diluting their waste stream is, they have a tank full of wastewater, and they know it's not going to meet their limit, so they go and put the water hose in it and just turn the water on to dilute it to the point that they would be compliant with their permit limits. In this scenario, I don't think that the intent is the same. I think that it's a very unique scenario. Maybe I need to go read the preamble a little more on dilution, but I don't really think that it's the same as dilution. But I would probably need to ask you a few more questions regarding that. But just based on the fact that you said they're not categorical, I think that they could combine those two waste streams and discharge those because they're going to do it anyways, right? And so that's essentially the end of pipe for all wastewater generated at that one facility. So I don't know. That probably doesn't help you any, but.
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah, that's a challenging one. Diana, I'd love to talk with you more about that because I'm actually trying to help a client of ours with the exact same scenario, and it's not extremely clear in my opinion.
Well, Josh, I think that's all, unless the gentleman who wanted to ask his question finally figured out how to unmute, but I don't. I can't figure out how to unmute himself. But you're welcome to contact Josh with his information up on the slide there, and we all appreciate you coming, Josh, and giving a great presentation. It seems like everybody enjoyed it. And to Kelly, this is being recorded, so you can access all the presentations from today and tomorrow at a later time. And plus, we have the workbook that you can follow along with too. And with that, I thank you, Josh, and we will move on to our one of our sponsors with Aquatic Informatics, which Rich Prinster. So Rich has been with Aquatic Informatics for almost 10 years, where he has helped hundreds of municipal pretreatment programs address their data management issues with Linko software. In his current role as strategic account manager, he focuses on bridging data silos within water utilities to enable better, more timely decisions, and has written many articles on the subject. Rich and his wife are recent empty nesters in Colorado, where he's able to take advantage of fishing, mountaineering, and skiing in his free time. Take it away, Rich.
All right, Jolene, can you just confirm that you can hear me okay and you can see my screen?
Yep, I can see your screen. I can hear you just fine.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for that intro. It's a real privilege to be a sponsor of this organization. I think it's so important to be able to, get together, whether it's virtually. I know it's not ideal, but we do need to get together. There's been terrific discussion, and I hate following Josh because he's such it's just a wealth of information, but such great discussions going on in the chat, and I hope that continues throughout the conference. I really appreciate being here. Linko has been a sponsor of this organization for a really long time. Now we get to refer to ourselves as Aquatic Informatics, and I wanted to talk a little bit about what that means to the market in general. But as we get going here, what I'll do is just talk about Linko for a little bit, and some of the cool things that Linko provides as far as the automation, because really I don't want to do a software demo. Rather, I want to talk about some concepts that will really help build a stronger and more resilient community. And by that, I mean allowing you all to be able to get out and develop those relationships, do those inspections that Josh was talking about, and make sure that the community is safe and protected, moving forward in the future. And how do we do that? Well, technology really helps with that in being able to automate a lot of the things that Josh talked about in 403.8, the pretreatment procedures, all of the stuff around permitting and inspections and all of the sampling, whether that's the authority sampling or the self-monitoring reports from the industries and their sampling efforts. So Linko's really, over the last 25 years, been able to develop a lot of technology that addresses some of these bottlenecks, so that there can be better community involvement with building those relationships, going over the permits, like Josh was saying. You know, these industries aren't going to take the time necessarily to memorize their permits and what their limits are and everything else. So being able to go out there and really sit down and go through the permits is a big deal. And part of that is not being stuck behind a computer entering samples all the time. Linko really allows programs to take advantage of out-of-the-box functionality with flexible configurations in order to really support the individual programs. And Josh, again, talked a little bit about that sample program that the EPA makes available. And he said, you know, this is a great place to start, but it's a starting point. And there's always little nuances around, for instance, inspection efforts. I know Dallas, Texas inspects all of their industries twice a year. So that's more stringent, right? And they collect a lot of data around those inspections. So really making it your own, what's going to protect your POTW and the community as a whole to the best of your ability. And so automating inspections through collecting data digitally around a tablet, being able to review the inspection data in real time, just digitally, so that you can look at the last inspection report as you're out there doing your preparation, and even going through that last inspection report and then asking what's changed and making those notes on the next inspection report. Collecting samples, whether that's through your own lab and the LIMS in your lab, or the contract lab, and automatically importing those into the Linko database in order to calculate compliance and monitor SNC. And of course, collecting the samples from the industries. Linko provides the Linko Exchange in order to have the industries just log into a website and submit their reports electronically through a Chrome approved system. All of these things really come into play, and being able to talk with other databases. And one of the things that I want you all to do as we go through some of these case studies is to really think about all the data you collect for your program, and then sort of think about how it can be used for more than just compliance. Because really the fact is that it's very expensive to collect data for the first time, but as you use it more and more, it becomes more and more valuable. So if you can share fog data with your O&M team, for instance, where's the value in that? So what I'd like to do is, for the first case study, look at Marlborough, Massachusetts, and Matt Santella is much like you. This might, I think this will resonate with several of you, because he's got 15 permitted significant industries, 20 permitted non-SIUs with samples, a fairly large fog program. He's doing the dental amalgam program and managing 2 townships, along with making sure that there's, investigating infiltration issues. So this is all one guy, and the way this came around was that he was managing the industrial pretreatment program. The community was having some issues with overflows caused by fats, oil, and grease. So of course he inherited the fog program, which was in place but deprioritized. He really wasn't doing anything, and management came to him and said, you know what, we've got to get this goo. Stop the restaurants contributing all this stuff to our collection system. So this needs to be a higher priority. And at that point, he's like, well, either I need more people, or I need to be able to automate all of the stuff that I have to do. And so he really put in place together a world-class pretreatment and fog program. Now he's generating his permits automatically. He was really setting up the database in order to really support his programs. He's got frequencies for inspections. He's got frequencies for the permit renewal cycles. He's got all of the sampling events, whether that's the authority sampling events, or the self-monitoring sampling events from the industries, all scheduled. So now it just shows up on his Outlook calendar, and he knows exactly what he needs to be doing, when he needs to be doing it. Through that, he's now able to collect those self-monitoring reports electronically through the Linko Exchange and the Chromair approved system. And he's really addressed all of the bottlenecks to the data so that he can really meet his goal, which was to spend more time in the community. He's also, through his FOG program, provided the ability for haulers or restaurants to just report their clean out activity. So now he's able to not only schedule the clean outs for the FOG facilities in the Linko FOG software, but he can now match that up with the actual pump out activity, so that he gets a report every month on who's pumped out, and more importantly, who hasn't, so that he can schedule his time more effectively. And ultimately, he's built this program that now provides a lot of visibility into all of his activities. Everything's scheduled, and he really feels like he's running his program like a major institution. So as we bring these things together, we as an organization came together and really thought big around our mission, where we want to be able to organize the world's water information for faster and better decisions. And we can break this down into a lot of different things, but ultimately we are now a part of a much larger organization. It's really exciting to be in the same division as Hawk and Ott and Paul, in order to bring these technologies and solutions together. And I'll talk about Hawk in just a little bit. I wanted to just provide an overview of the portfolio that we're assembling and have assembled to this point, and will continue to grow in order to meet that vision of organizing the world's data, so that those that participate really have access to better decision-making processes, and ultimately being able to create stronger and more resilient communities. With that, I'll start with the WaterTrack software over on the sort of 1 o'clock side, being able to provide the reporting for drinking water and wastewater systems data. So this is certainly creating DMRs and submitting those either electronically or however that needs to happen for the reporting, but also looking at the data collection process and automating the data from the labs, as well as the field data that's collected through electronic inspections and samples, in order to create those reports. I've already talked about Linko, so I won't waste your time anymore on there. Here we see that Hawk is now part of the aquatic Hawk WIMS, I will say, is part of the aquatic informatics portfolio, where the WIMS software, and many of you may be using the WIMS software for your plant data, and it's really software, and it made more sense to move that group over to aquatic informatics. We're really excited about that, because now we can start looking at, again, using data in different ways, and how will that affect the way that you all create your annual report for your industrial pretreatment program. Obviously, there's a section for plant data and local limits, and being able to interchange that data is really exciting. The next solution is our Tokay. We bought Tokay a couple of years ago for the cross-connection control program. Really, there's a couple of great things about the Tokay software, where it's able to bring in data from the water billing database so that you always have an up-to-date list of any hazards that are associated with commercial buildings and how to protect those the water distribution system. And then being able to provide a really easy way for the testers to report their annual test of the actual backflow device just through a website and making sure that everything's getting tested. Moving on to Aquarius and time series historian analytics for the environmental data. This is something that I use as just a fisherman in looking at flows for the rivers, and USGS uses the Aquarius software to make sure to monitor all of the surface water around the country, and so all of the analytics that are starting to come together around these different solutions. And then finally, Cetaru, which we just acquired earlier this year, the asset management and maintenance work order management for drinking water distribution systems and wastewater collection systems. And I know I'm running through these things. We went just a little bit long with Josh, so I'll just take another minute or two. But I did want to talk a little bit about Cetaru because it's really exciting to see how these things are all coming together around that data and coming back to that question that I asked earlier around how can you use your compliance data in other ways. One of the things that Cetaru brings to the table is really being able to work with a lot of different databases. And in fact, there's a case study from Victorville, California, where they're using Tyler Munis, which I know many of you are using for your customer information system. And it was all very disjointed, so there was no real way of being able to take a customer complaint or some kind of request from the public that comes in through the Munis system and get that over to the O&M team for investigation purposes, for instance. And so being able to tie that all together where you can still use best of breed technology for customer information management systems, for instance, and then bringing it together through a GIS-enabled application to provide digital inspections and investigation through Cetaru is really powerful. And it turns out they did a study and it saved over 1,600 hours each year in reporting efficiencies by getting away from paper and aligning the requests with the different procedures that the operations maintenance team had to do. So really knowing who you're regulating, automating the data collection through different technologies and collecting that data digitally so that you can really use it, ensuring compliance and all of these things come together to strengthen your community by providing a safer way of collecting and managing that data. So man, 15 minutes goes pretty quick, but sorry to go over just a little bit, but appreciate the time and the attention on this overview of aquatic informatics.
Well, and we thank you for being such a great sponsor of our fall workshop, Rich. So definitely, if anybody wants to reach out to get more information, his information is on the screen. Plus, it's also in the workbook. So feel free to reach out to Rich and get more information. And thank you, Rich, again. And with that, I do believe we are taking a break. So I think we will come back at 9:45 to continue the workshop. And I think Dave or Chelsea, if you have the slideshow, we'll just play that while we're getting, and we'll see you in another 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, Jolene. Hey Dave, can you play the slideshow?
I'm trying. Uh, Chelsea, is it playing okay?
Yep. Thanks.
No problem. You just can't tell when you're doing it yourself.
Good morning, everyone. It's 9:45, so we shall get started again. Courtney, if you're ready. So our next presenter is from Pima County. Her name is Courtney Kaufman, and she's the Permanent Regulatory Compliance Specialist for Pima County. And there might be a few slides missing from your workbook. We're hoping to get that rectified and sent out afterwards if you don't have all the slides she's going to be showing. So take it away, Courtney.
Thanks. All right, let me get my slideshow up here real quick. All righty.
I see your slideshow and I hear you just fine.
Fantastic. So we're good to go.
You're
All
good.
right. Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for allowing me to present today. I'm very excited about this topic. Like we just said, my name's Courtney Kaufman, and I'm a Permit and Regulatory Compliance Specialist with Pima County Industrial Wastewater Control. And I'm here today to talk to you guys about a new program that Pima County IWC just launched. It's called the Pima County Preferred Pumper Program, or the PPP. Essentially, this program is really a partnership between grease pumping companies and IWC to create a standard of cleaning and reporting procedures for grease interceptors. And also joining me today is Mr. Jason Grodman, aka my boss. Jason, would you like to say hello to everyone?
Hello, everyone.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So Jason is going to be here to help me answer any of the questions that I don't know the answer to, because, you know, I can't know everything. That's all right. So I'm going to get started then. Potentially. There it is. All right, so to start off, I want to go over just a little bit of background on Pima County. So we have approximately 3,500 miles of sanitary sewer, around 4,000 restaurants, and to cover all those restaurants, we have 2 amazing fog inspectors and their supervisor. These guys kick butt. They're out there just going nuts every day. But there's 4,000 restaurants, and so based on that, it would take us approximately 7 years to inspect all of the FSEs in Pima County. That's insane, because you know as well as I do that restaurants come and go more than every 7 years. So it would just be an impossible task. So because of that, we have to set up our inspection priorities. And to do that, we rely a lot on conveyance reports. So our conveyance division, they're out there, you know, checking the lines every day. And whenever they see a large, you know, amount of grease buildup or anything like that in the line, they'll let us know. That way we can go out and direct our inspections based on that. We also get health department lists. So the health department is notified a lot sooner than we are about, you know, when a new owner is going to be taking over for a previous restaurant. And before, you know, anything changes, you know, new sinks, new plumbing, whatever, we want to be able to go in and make sure that the new owners, you know, they know where the grease interceptor is, they know what's plumbed where. That way, if they do change things, we don't have to ask them to rechange it again. Development services, they send us building plans. So any new restaurant that's going to be built, they'll send us those plans so that we can make sure that all of the grease-bearing wastes are going to a properly sized grease interceptor. And so that's very beneficial, so we know what's coming. And odor complaints. Again, our fog team, they respond to all the odor complaints and sanitary sewer overflows here in Pima County. And so whenever we get the calls, they go out and they'll make sure that whatever is contributing to that complaint gets taken care of. So speaking of SSOs, on this slide, it's really just to show you our SSO history. So as you can see, in the early 2000s or so, we were getting over 200 SSOs annually, and that was just not acceptable. So we had to revamp our Capacity Management Operation and Maintenance Program, or CMOM. And so our conveyance division, they've really worked hard to clean and repair, you know, every inch of conveyance every 5 years. Again, rock stars. So the combination of our fog team and our, you know, conveyance division really has equaled very minimal SSOs. If you look at our, you know, our grease-related SSO data, you'll see we really aren't doing too bad in that department. We had an understandable increase during the pandemic because grease interceptor maintenance was, kind of put on the back burner. So restaurants, they were closing. So why pay to get your interceptor pumped if you're not even open? And then even if they did reopen, they were really just trying to stay afloat. So there's no immediate, financial benefit to getting your interceptor pumped. So why dish out that money? Obviously, things aren't totally back to normal. I mean, we're still doing a virtual, conference right now. But, even with that slight uptick in occurrences, we're still well below our benchmark from the EPA's report to Congress from 2004. Which was an average of 4.5 SSOs per 100 miles of conveyance line. We here in Pima County, we're right around 0.8 total SSOs per 100 miles of conveyance. So on that end, we're doing pretty good. Okay. I just wanted to quickly go over some of our FSE regulations. So our ordinance, the standards from that are that all HGIs must be cleaned at least monthly. I'm sure a lot of these are very similar to your ordinance regulations. Our GGIs have to be cleaned at least every 6 months, or when the total accumulation of fog and solids reaches 25% of the overall depth. And then as far as record keeping, our facilities are required to keep their records on site for a minimum of 3 years. Just to prove their adherence to our maintenance standards.
Yeah. Oh, hey, Court. So, one of the things we do have in our sewer use ordinance is that 25% rule. And you can see our man, Steven, in that picture there is using a device to see if, in fact, that GGI is at that 25% rule or not. I was sort of wondering, if the folks on here are interested in hitting up the chat of, kind of how many of you out there have this 25% rule in your sewer use ordinance? And if you do you ever go out and check it with, some sort of device, Sludge Judge, or what Steven has there is a Dipstick Pro bought specifically for this. Our fog inspectors, respect the 25% rule, but they definitely do not like checking to see, because at some point you've got to clean that device as well. So I just thought it would be interesting if anyone has that, in their ordinance, and how they go about if, they go ahead and check. Thanks, Court.
No, that's fantastic. I honestly love that it's called a Dipstick Pro, because I don't know, in my mind, that's just, the name is fantastic. Anyway. All right, so like I said, our FSCs are required to, properly maintain their interceptors. So pumpers will have to go out and collect that waste. And here in Pima County, we have a septage receiving station, but no grease waste is actually accepted there. So instead, we have 4 permitted private facilities that can accept grease waste. And we consider these facilities significant industrial users. So as such, we inspect and sample them twice a year. And they send us self-monitoring reports quarterly. So we got to make sure that they're maintaining our regulations. All right, so now we get to talk about the challenges that we were experiencing that really led up to our preferred pumper program. Like I stated, in our ordinance, restaurants need to keep those pumping records on site for us to review, because during our inspection process, we want to verify their frequency and who's pumping them. I'm sure you guys have seen this too, but for the most part, the records really aren't kept on site, especially for chain restaurants. Chain restaurants, they send it to a corporate office that's off site. And so another issue is that the on-site employees really don't know where the records are kept, or who's pumping them, or how frequently they're coming, because that's not their job. They're there to work the kitchen, work the floor, whatever. They don't care what's being pumped in the back. And prior to starting our program, approximately 30% of our inspections would result in outstanding records requests. So this means that restaurant would be in non-compliance with IWC. And another issue, obviously, is with the invoices themselves. They may not be complete or accurate or legible in any way. I mean, I've seen an invoice that instead of saying, a grease trap was pumped, it said a wash rack. So I have no idea what they actually pumped. I have no idea. Anyway, So obviously a way to remediate, these issues is through enforcement. But enforcement for not receiving records is really time consuming and really cumbersome. I mean, 30% of our inspections, and there's 4,000 restaurants. The outstanding records request, like I said, very time consuming. And for me, it doesn't feel great to, go through the enforcement side for a record.
Right, absolutely. I mean, that there's a lot of work on enforcement side, and again, when we're talking about follow-ups, and we've heard that already, a little bit today. It's time consuming to follow up, and who do you get on the other end of the phone sometimes doesn't have that information. One thing I do like about this slide is that one manifest down there, the yellow one that says county wastewater said that this must be done every month from now on. That's cool. Thanks, Corey.
No, I love that they're using us as an excuse to pump it every month. I mean, good for them, truthfully. So another challenge that we run into that I'm sure you guys have all seen too, is the quality of the pump outs themselves. So these first set of pics right here, this is a 3-chamber GGI that was allegedly pumped 2 months before this inspection. So unless the best management practices at this restaurant are just horrendous, that was not pumped 2 months ago. I'm sorry. And then we always get those classic dumpster over the lids. Obviously, this person was either too busy or too lazy, whatever, to move it, but that has not been pumped in a very long time then. And another issue that we run into is that we'll go to an interceptor and only the inlet chamber has been pumped out. Yes, that is where most of the grease is accumulating, but still, our ordinance states you need to pump the entire interceptor. And this could be, maybe the pumper didn't know that they had to pump both. I don't know. The training could be different from different pumpers. But either way, they need to pump the entire interceptor, not just the inlet. So adding it to our challenges. All right, so when trying to come up with possible solutions for the the pumping record issue, we thought of maybe using uniform manifests for all the pumpers, or the the automated reporting with fog software, which I love software. Like, don't get me wrong, I love technology. Another thought we had was maybe a new permitting system to help with enforcement. Again, 4,000 restaurants, a whole new permitting system for them could be cumbersome as well. And then the possible solutions that we thought of for the quality of the pumpings, we thought of maybe doing an on-site pump out audit. So going and watching them and helping them learn what we expect. To go along with that was educational outreach for the pumpers. Again, teaching them what our standards are, or mailers, a little more hands-off on that side. Just because you don't have all the people in the world to do the outreach side of things. So while we were coming up with those possible solutions for our records and quality of pumpings, another thought popped into my head. And so back in 2018, I attended the AZ-FOG Fall Workshop up in Tempe, and I heard an awesome presentation about a preferred pumper program. So Clayton Brown from the Western States Alliance did a presentation about the preferred pumper program in the Oregon area, and it really stuck with me. I thought it was a fantastic idea. And with a few alterations, we thought we may be able to use it to help us with our problems. Now, before we can really formulate any program, we really have to establish what our vision and direction is here in Pima County. Our director is very, very business friendly. So any program we came up with, we would have to sell them on from the customer service side of things. We also, like I said, thought of all the other possibilities, like the mandatory manifests or new software, all that. But for anything like that, we really received a lot of pushback, because it's really hard to convince people to either tighten up our ordinance or force companies to purchase new software when the problem really isn't visible. I mean, even though we know, even with our low number of SSOs, we know that we are not capturing all of the restaurant grease before it gets to the sewer. There's no way. But because of our lack of SSOs, it makes it really hard to convince, like a board of supervisors to agree to a more stringent policy that would cost restaurants and pumpers money. And then here in Tucson, we really are considered a big little city. We are extremely low tech here. We even have permittees here that still refuse to use email. Everything is either over the phone or through the regular snail mail. So new technology is a very, very hard sell here in the desert Southwest here. So really, our direction for the new program had to be one of building relationships instead of changing regulations. So with our direction in mind, we started to establish goals for our future program. Those goals were that we wanted to create a program that would get restaurants back into compliance with record keeping. We wanted to utilize our existing regulatory framework. We wanted to have no additional costs to restaurants and pumpers. And really, we wanted more insight into whatever potential grease-related issues there might be in the sewer. Okay, so with those goals, what we did was we started to look at, instead of trying to get those records from those 4,000 restaurants, how could we work with those dozen or so grease pumpers that we have in Pima County? It seems way more efficient, especially since those pumpers already have those records in their system. They have to keep track of who and when they pumped, for invoicing purposes, obviously. And they already take notes on the, interceptor issues or conditions. Because, if they get a call from a restaurant owner saying, hey, you never told me that my baffle was missing or whatever, they can say, well, if you looked at your invoices, ... kind of covers their butts. And truthfully, they see way more than we do on a daily basis. So if we could utilize their expertise to direct our inspections, that's basically getting us free inspectors, which honestly, when you tell an executive board that free inspectors, they really do like that part. All right, so we decided before building, an actual preferred pumper program, we really had to see if a program is even possible. So in February of 2020, we reached out to our pilot pumper to see if they wanted to do a mock preferred pumper program. This particular pumper pumps about 10% of the restaurants in Pima County, so a very, very large chunk. They're out there a lot. And I've personally seen this pumper pump more grease interceptors than any other company. We already have a pretty good working relationship with them. Like I said, I've seen them pump way more than others, so I trust them more than others. And so what we did is we pitched this idea that every time there's an outstanding records request, we had been asking them to send us those last 4 invoices, whatever. And for them, that was very time consuming because they had to go into all their files and scan things individually to us, and they didn't like doing it. So instead of having them, do those individual scans, we thought, well, what if you just send us one monthly spreadsheet every month that basically had whoever you pumped during that previous month. So in essence, in the same amount of time that it would take them to send us, one customer's invoices, we were able to get all of their customers for the previous month, and they loved that idea. And this is what we got for our very first spreadsheet. So we utilized their existing work order spreadsheets, so they didn't have to put in any additional effort really. And their reports had amazing information. They had, when the last service was, when it's due, what the capacity of their interceptor was, the frequency. And from this report, it really did develop even more as the program developed. So the pumper started adding in, notes on the interceptor condition or any other weird occurrences they were seeing out in the field. And like I said, this was the very first one that was sent in 2020. And if you look at how many people were serviced in just 2 days, that is way more than we would be able to see in 2 days with our 2 fog inspectors. It's crazy. And so with this information, we were really able to develop a more proactive approach to inspections instead of a reactive one, to when something was already going wrong. And the pilot program really allowed us to work through how we would approach these inspections. For example, like we wouldn't want to tell the restaurant that we got their information from their pumper or that their pumper said that this was broken or whatever, because we don't want to lose the pumper a customer. We just want to be able to fix problems. So all in all, the year we spent building our program and how we would run the program proved very successful, enough so that we really felt confident in taking the next step, which was building the actual program.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at this spreadsheet. Again, there's 35 entries just for 2 days. And, on this page, if you look at number 35, the Panda House, they're on a call-in. So not sure exactly what that means. Also, they only have a 50-gallon unit. So, per our ordinance, that trap needs to be cleaned out at least once a month, potentially more depending, on the usage. So that call in is disturbing for us. And that's one right away that we're going to follow up with.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's a Panda House, and maybe they're super good at call-ins, maybe, but either way, we like to see them on an actual schedule. So great insight that we never would have gotten without this spreadsheet. So yeah, once we decided to officially, build the program, like I had my idea and that was great and all, but at this point I needed someone with more knowledge than me to show me how to make this idea a reality. So for this part, I'd like to throw it to Jason.
Oh, that's me.
That's you.
Right. So when we're talking about getting program approval, who do we need to engage? So some of my first calls were to the county attorney, that we already have a relationship with for our violations and enforcement efforts. So just, broaching that, what's the process? Can we at some point, recommend, companies, private companies to, pump? What, are there other entities doing that? How does that work? Also, of course, our director and the executive team, we're going to need to come up with a presentation to show them the need. And it always works with me when, the employees come and, remind me of something I might have said and it was a good idea, then I'm like, yeah, that's a pretty good idea. We should do that. And of course, the Board of Supervisors, if we're going to change anything in our sewer use ordinance, we're going to need the Board of Supervisors support, public comments, and a communications department. That we have a great communications department here at Pima County that does graphics and will hopefully get a web design for us. I, do not know how to do that. So we are going to need some help along the way. So these are some folks and some entities that we reached out to, just again to see how possible this was going to be. And so then, then you got to pitch it. So as we made those phone calls and did a little bit of our homework, our sewer use ordinance already has our grease management program as part of it. So the frequencies of pumping, the requirements as far as what appurtenances need to be connected, that part of the plumbing code is in the ordinance already as well. So we did not have to change the ordinance, so that took out the Board of Supervisors approval needs. And, in the pitch to management, we, showed that this program is operating in other places in the country. It's successful, and that, we've based some of our, program standards on those as well, and our, existing infrastructure. No extra cost, for the department. Not a lot of extra cost to the pumper or the restaurant community. It's really about getting compliance and strengthening our relationships.
All right, thank you, Jason. So like Jason said, we utilized, existing programs to help us build our program. And now I'm excited. I get to show you what we came up with. So this document, this is our program standards document. So first thing a pumper would need to do is review this, make sure that they know what our expectations are of them, and to see if they want to become a member, based off of that. So this document outlines our, our evaluation period for them, emphasizes that this is a voluntary program. It also states our cleaning standards, and it was again based off our ordinance, so nothing crazy there. And reviews the requirement for that monthly work order report. So again, that way they know everything they're in for. So next up, if the grease pumper decides yes, they do want to be a part of this program, they have to fill out the registration. So this document again outlines our criteria. Want everyone to be very well aware of it. It creates a point of contact for IWC with the pumper, because we need to know who we need to talk to if we see an issue or anything like that. And one thing that we added in there too is the waste disposal method. So prior to this, we honestly didn't know exactly where all of the pumpers in Pima County were disposing of their waste, because it was all private facilities. So for this, we're able to then build more of, have more of an idea of where people are taking their waste, which is huge. All right, so once they send us their registration document and we make sure it's all completed correctly, the pumper enters their 6-month evaluation period. So this evaluation document is sent to them so that they understand what the next 6 months will entail. Basically, the pumper just has to show us that they comprehend the cleaning standards of the program, and they do this by allowing IWC to observe a GGI and an HGI getting pumped out every month. We also conduct spot checks of restaurants that the pumper had recently pumped based off of their, the monthly reports they send us, because we want to make sure that they're doing as good of a job when we're there as when we're not there. This is also the time that we help the pumper, figure out how they're going to send in those monthly reports, verify that they have the ability to. So we'll work with the pumper to create a spreadsheet that, has all the necessary information while utilizing whatever program they already have established for record keeping. So not all the reports, will look exactly the same, but as long as they have all the information we need, then that's solid. So here's a real world example of our evaluation. So for this one, we met up with a pumper that's going through the evaluation period right now, and we observed them pump out an HGI. And this pumper did a fantastic job. Like, they pulled every single piece out, they washed it down, they cleaned it so good. They were pulling stuff, pieces apart that I'd never seen before. And what was really, really cool is while we were there, the restaurant owner walked out, saw that Pima County was there, which is weird, and so pulled me aside to see what was happening, because, people are curious. And after explaining what was going on, he wanted me to note that he absolutely loved his pumper, that he's never had an issue with them. And so at the bottom of this, you can see restaurant owner noted how happy he is. Just little things like that. It's a really nice relationship building. And like I said, we do this for an HGI and a GGI every month during this period. And it helps us build the relationship with the pumper, that'll be in the field. So if the pumper passes their evaluation period, they get added to our PPP website, as well as this handout that you see here. So this handout is distributed to all of the restaurants during our normal compliance inspections. It has some really good information for the restaurant as well, really just telling them what the PPP is, why they should use a preferred pumper, as well as, the benefits of maintaining their interceptor, because sometimes a restaurant might not think about it. They also received this super, super cool PPP decal. I love this decal. It's awesome. And they can put this decal on their website, on their bids that they're sending out to people, really whatever they want to. They're, the signature line in their email, whatever. We've also created a bumper sticker with this image, so they can put it on their trucks, on their water bottles, I don't know, wherever they want to put it. And for all these documents that I'm showing, or any of the information, you can find all of them on our website, the pima.gov/preferred pumper, or reach out to me if you want to see anything or review anything. All right, so now the fun parts. What are the benefits? So for the FSE, if they use a preferred pumper, that restaurant will be in compliance with our ordinance record keeping. And well, we have it all in our system, so they're in compliance. And proper maintenance really helps prevent, discharges of fats, oils, and grease that might clog their drains, as well as our POTW. And I mean, maintenance costs for them for the pumping is way less than if, there's an SSO that they caused because of, their fog. And proper maintenance really does help protect their investment in their grease interceptor. It can extend the life of their interceptor, which is, great. And with continuous performance evaluations, the restaurant really can rest assured that their grease interceptors are being properly maintained. Now, as far as the pumpers go, like I stated, the members are listed on our website, as well as that handout. And like I said, that handout is distributed to all the restaurants during our routine inspections. And because of our open line of communication between the pumpers and IWC, the business assistance side for the pumper is way more streamlined. They can call me anytime. They know my voice very well at this point. And anytime they have an issue, they feel comfortable calling me, and I love that. And like I said, that decal really is used to broadcast their membership in the program. It shows they're a cut above the rest, which is also very beneficial for them. And really the best benefit of all is whatever benefits us, right? So for us, it's we've seen, restaurants staying in compliance with our record keeping criteria, which is great. The uniform cleaning standards have really helped with, better quality pump outs. We've really been able to help restaurants get onto proper maintenance schedules with their pumper, which that honestly can result in less grease related SSOs right there. We've had more beneficial inspections because we know where problem areas might arise already. So let's hit those areas. And we've seen less non-compliant restaurants. So we went from 30% of our inspections resulting in outstanding records requests to only 12% of our inspections having those outstanding records, which is huge. That's a huge number to drop down to. And a added benefit that has been really cool is that during that 6-month evaluation period, we can train new inspectors on, the operation of an interceptor or the importance of proper maintenance. Because I know for me, it took a very long time for me to see an empty, GGI. And it just so happened that, I was on a restaurant inspection and the pumper showed up. And that was how I was able to see one. But for a new inspector, it's super beneficial because when you have someone just telling you about a GGI or how it works, that's great. But if you don't get to see like a baffle or a T or how the whole process works, it really doesn't click. And so add in new inspector training to the benefits. All right, now we get to do the fun part where it's all the cool cases we've seen because of this program. So this particular restaurant was on a bi-weekly pumping schedule because of how quickly their HGI was filling up. And basically they stopped paying their pumper. And so on our spreadsheet we saw this do not service. No idea what that meant. So I gave the pumper a call. They notified me that means they are no longer going to be going out there because of the lack of payment. So obviously the restaurant could change to a different pumper and they could be getting serviced by someone else, which is fantastic. At least then it's getting maintained. But we had to find out. So we went out there. And at the point that when we had gotten there, it had been a year since they were last pumped. And this is what we found. This is completely disgusting. It is just solid grease. Kind of looks like eggs, but not the eggs you want to eat. So by the time we got out there, the water wasn't even able to flow through. It was just a trickle. And so they were getting backups and everything else, like guaranteed. And what was great about this is, honestly, we never would have known, about any of this until there was an overflow or, an odor complaint or something like that. And so as soon as we opened it, they were trying to tell me that they had just had this pumped like a couple weeks ago. Try a better lie, please. But anyway, so right then and there, we had them call their pumper, and they took care of all those back payments right there on the spot. And the pumper was out there very next day, cleaned it all out, nice and pretty. And so what's great is now we're able to check up on this particular restaurant by looking at, the monthly spreadsheets every month. So I can check, and every month they have been getting pumped, and it's great. No more issue. Everyone wins. Okay, so for this one, I'd gotten an email from a pumper with a list of restaurants that had stopped paying. So basically notifying us that they are no longer going to be servicing these clients. And so unless they change to a different pumper, they're not going to be serviced. So we waited until this particular GGI would have been serviced next, and then we inspected the restaurant. We found that it definitely needed that quarterly pumping because it was starting to, flow back. The grease was flowing back into the inlet, and that's not good at all. We have a little dinosaur that's dying in the grease. Again, not good. So we informed the restaurant that they needed to maintain their pretreatment equipment, and that if there was any issue in the POTW because of their lack of maintenance, then they would be responsible for the cleanup costs, which are way more expensive than their pumping costs. So they happily chose to catch up on their unpaid services and get back on a quarterly schedule.
Yeah, I mean, and just imagine, I mean, just going into this inspection too, armed with this information, you know, already. Again, these are sort of parts of the program that we didn't expect, you know, to get this kind of information, you know, from our pumper. Like, they're not pumping these folks anymore. So again, like Courtney said, unless they, you know, contracted with a new pumper, they're just going to let it ride until they're experiencing problems themselves. And, you know, even then we've seen restaurants, you know, wait as long as possible. So, you know, just an amazing benefit that we didn't necessarily see coming.
Thanks, Jason. All right, so this next set, so these pictures are of one restaurant owner, but two different restaurants. So what happened was we received these pictures from a pumper in the field. He actually texted them to me. And just as a, hey, FYI, we've been telling this restaurant owner for a while that their HGIs just aren't working anymore. And a lot of the grease was actually seeping just into the ground underneath the interceptor on the left. I mean, so much so that it wasn't even getting to the outlet pipe. So at that point, you know, it's not our problem, right? It's not getting to the POTW. Just kidding, just kidding. And then the location on the right, this one was actually part of a larger investigation because Conveyance saw, you know, a large amount of grease in the main public sewer line, and they asked us for help in finding out where it was coming from. We had this information on hand, which was great, and we were able to get the owner to replace the busted up one very quickly. That way they could avoid paying cleaning costs to Conveyance. So in 1 month, we went from this janky unit to a brand new high efficiency unit, and everyone's happy.
Yeah, and just another thing, Court, you know, since you started engaging in about February of 2020 with the one pumper, and we have, you know, some more working through the program, you know, right now, we've had 16 installations of grease interceptors, just replacements, basically, from the information that we got either directly from the pumper or from the monthly lists that they've sent us, where, you know, in the comments section, you know, they're writing in the conditions or the poor conditions of some of these interceptors, and with subsequent inspections, you know, we get them replaced. Also, just one more thing, all of them were replaced without going through an enforcement process as well, and that also, you know, is part of our director's, you know, vision, as much compliance as possible, you know, without having to go through enforcement. Of course, it's a great tool, you know, for us, you know, to have. But again, you know, this program has been, you know, showing some success in that areas as well. Again, slightly unexpected, but, you know, just amazing so far. Thanks, Court.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so these next ones are ones that we benefited from really early on. These are actually from some of our first few pilot program spreadsheets. But immediately, I mean, for me, my eyes fall on this, you know, disconnected note, especially since, you know, it also says McDonald's in the same exact line, which is insane, as well as this little 40. I mean, I don't know what McDonald's has a little 40, but either way, lots of surprising things just on that one line. This particular McDonald's is located where there's a really big main sewer line. So grease really hadn't built up too much in the POTW. But at this point, they'd been disconnected for 3 years. And so that in and of itself, I had to check it out. And we got there, and yes, it was a very small little 40 that was completely dry and hadn't seen water in a millennia. I don't know. It's ridiculous for McDonald's. Either way, we were able to get out there. Obviously, not a working, you know, not a well-sized interceptor for that McDonald's. So we had them update to a more efficient and new unit, and now everything is connected as it should be. So that one was awesome. And then the second one, again, says disconnected. We went out there, and it turns out the owner had no idea that they were disconnected, and they had been trying to figure out why they were having a lot of backups into their kitchen sinks, and he couldn't figure out why he had to keep getting things jetted out. Turns out the pumper was leaving word, you know, with the day shift manager that, hey, you're not connected. but the owner wasn't getting that message. You know, miscommunication, it happens. So once we told him what the issue was, he was actually really thankful in being able to figure that out. Because all we did was we went to a wall stub where it used to be connected, put a hose in, and water came flowing out. So we were able to solve his issue for him right then and there.
And one other thing, Court, you know, we might be, you know, some folks might be thinking about, you know, well, this is bypass, you know, the enforcement of bypassing a grease interceptor. You have McDonald's, and you just suggested is discharging straight to sewer for, you know, years. Was it 2 or 3 years?
Three years.
Yeah. So, or, you know, we should go get them, you know, for sure. And we do. On occasion. One of the interesting things that I came across as a fog inspector many years ago was that I was running into some facilities that had disconnected their plumbing, particularly wash and rinse basins of a 3-compartment sink, from their wall connection and redirecting those drains to a floor sink, which was probably receiving the sanitized basin already. And consequently, the wash and rinse basins were no longer discharging to the grease interceptor. So that's bypass of the grease interceptor. And so, again, that's a violation. We're going to bring you in, you know, you're going to have to, you know, fix the plumbing, pay fines, you know, potentially. What I you know, realized after engaging with some of the other departments in Pima County, particularly the consumer health and food safety inspectors, they were actually requiring indirect drainage or air gaps from every sink basically in the kitchen. So when they would come and do inspections and see a direct connection, no air break, no air gap, they would require the restaurant to change the plumbing. If there was a floor sink in the area, they just redirected to that. On a number of occasions, that floor sink was not connected to the grease interceptor, so it wasn't receiving a waste from a grease-bearing sink. So we actually ran into, after, you know, sort of stumbling upon this, and then we engaged in a partnership with Consumer Health and Food Safety, so we're not having so many of these issues, but there's the potential that we had more than 100 FSEs that were bypassing pretreatment on requirements for another Pima County entity. That makes it very hard for us to enforce or, you know, go after restaurants for bypassing, you know, intentionally their grease interceptor, because they might have been directed to do that by us. Thanks, Court.
Yeah, fun situations, you know. All right, this one honestly really surprised me. So I got a call from one of our pumpers. It was late in the afternoon. Apparently they'd been jetting this particular restaurant because they were having backups into the kitchen. But they were telling me it's not their interceptor. They wanted us to get out there because they were worried that maybe, you know, the private line in the parking lot had collapsed or something. So letting us know, hey, this is about to overflow. So we went out. It was indeed starting to overflow at the manhole just past the interceptor, and it was flowing down the drive-through. And obviously, I don't understand this, but people don't care. It makes no sense to me. That's literally raw sewage, and they're just going to keep driving through. Whatever. People are weird. So we saw the flowing. Turned out the private line really was so plugged up that it needed to be excavated like ASAP. And for that, the restaurant wasn't really pushing for that to happen very fast. They didn't want to close. So we had to nudge them.
And that's, in fact, Court, I went out there that, you know, afternoon and saw, you know, what these pictures are showing, except for, you know, the excavation part, and engaged with the restaurant manager, you know, to one, make sure that he was aware that this was going on. Two, that they had the pumper on standby, you know, continually to come out to evacuate. And three, you got to close down this restaurant. They were not inclined to do that. So again, using my relationships with other Pima County entities, including Department of Environmental Quality and Consumer Health and Food Safety. Those folks were more than eager to come out and make sure that the sewage overflow was going to stop immediately. Thanks, Court.
Awesome, thanks. So with the help of others, obviously, this particular restaurant, they had to get their interceptor pumped out multiple times a day until the situation was fixed, because they couldn't have that flowing out into the street. And the stoppage was actually caused by a utility knife and a pair of underwear. Who knows? Who knows? I don't ask questions. So for this particular instance, we never would have been able to respond as fast as we did had we not had our pumper, let us in on that issue. So great win for us and the pumper on that one. All right, so for this this last slide that I have, I really wanted to show you guys how our monthly reports have evolved over the creation of this program. So if you can remember the spreadsheet that I showed you guys earlier, it had a lot of fantastic information on it that was extremely helpful. But honestly, look how much this thing has grown. So this particular pumper is in the middle of their evaluation period right now. They're crushing it. They're doing fantastic. And we're now getting way more information than we could have even imagined. We're now really able to see where an issue could arise before an overflow happens. I mean, we have all these things to say, like trap is rotted out. Hey, this one is a brand new trap. Maybe we don't go over there right now. It helps us so much in directing where our inspections should be. And information like this, it's truthfully so vital to the success of this program. And this information is really hard to get without building that relationship. Like I said, software, I love software. Like I love technology. I wish we could use software. Because it's trackable, it's organizable, it's you can create graphs, and graphs are fun. But one thing that we had to do is focus on the human element. And yes, those software systems with their checks and letting us know that restaurants are getting pumped on a regular basis, great, fantastic. But it may not tell you the whole story, because the information we're getting through this, you might not get through just the checks and balances of a software. Jason, do you have any final notes on this slide?
Well, again, one of the things that we love about this, and Courtney pointed out too, is the relationship that we formed with the pumping companies as this is evolving. And we're developing a little bit of trust with each other, and I know that's a strange word, for some of us in the regulated community with pumping companies, and that's one of the things that we wanted to see if we could break through. And so far with our pilot pumper and the other company that we're working with right now, we feel like we're breaking down some of those barriers, but there's still a long way to go. We have a lot of other entities, or pumpers in our community that, haven't responded, to our outreach yet. So that'll be fun, as we go forward, to try to get some more interested parties, members of this alliance that we are, sort of working together on this. So thanks for the opportunity to wrap that up, Court. Thanks.
Yeah, really appreciate it, Jason. Thank you. So now we'll open it up. If you guys have any questions, we'd be happy to answer it. And if I don't know it, I'll have Jason answer it.
Well, first off, thank you, Courtney and Jason, for a great presentation. It was very informative and very cool to see how you implemented this. It was really great. There have been quite a few questions during your presentation, and I think Jason has answered most, but some of the things are like, what happens if the preferred hauler violates their good standing after you have already approved them?
Yeah, so the pumper themselves, they know that it is a continual evaluation thing where we go directly to them. We tell them what the issue is. If they don't fix the problem, they will be removed from that program. And they do have the option to fix whatever issues they're having and get back on, but then they'll have to go through the evaluation process again and do the whole thing step by step. So far, everyone has been super receptive, so we haven't had that issue. It is very new though. I mean, very new program. So I'm sure we're eventually going to have to deal with that kind of thing, but it is written into our standards that it's voluntary, and we can remove you if you don't follow our rules.
Thank you. And somebody asked if you require inlet plumbing in Pima County.
Hang on one second. Let me.
I think that was in reference into the one where it was backing up into the inlet.
Jason, do you have an answer for that one? Oh, you're muted.
Thanks, Court.
Yep.
I'm sorry, was that the question was about the inlet?
Yeah, do you require inlet plumbing?
Like jetting. So I don't, Court, is that part of the, I mean, all chambers have to be evacuated, fully, including, wall, pressure washing if necessary. Of course, we're trying to, some old GGIs, you might not want to scrape the walls, too much because the whole thing comes off. But I don't think we have a set requirement for like the inlet, like jetting. But, as far as the smaller devices, we do require to remove parts that are removable. And sometimes that is the case with the HGIs.
There was a clarification. It was the plumbing, not the pumping.
So we require an inlet T.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of what they're asking about the T?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Then yes, we do require a T.
And somebody asked about your disposal, or do you check on where the fog ends up, the disposal areas? Jason answered that, but I think this person missed the first part of it, but.
Yeah, right. So yes, we follow up, and there was a follow up too from Rodney as well. Like, well, hey, what about the out of town? So yeah, we haven't, really gotten that, that far, into it. We do know that some waste that gets pumped here does make its way up the 10. But yeah, we get those, but we have not really followed up at those facilities. The ones we have in town, the 4 that we permit, they're SIUs. So we're there. We sample independently twice a year. We inspect them at least twice a year, sometimes more often, depending on if there's anything of interest for us to go over there more often. And of course, part of that is manifests. Yeah.
Sorry. And there was questions about self-cleaning. You said you allow it, but so how do you check on that, or you just kind of still just use it as your regular inspections?
Yeah, so the restaurant themselves, they have to have a manifest, like they keep track of their self-cleaning. So they have to say how much they pumped, where they took it. A lot of times it's just dumpster. But if it's, a very small unit, they have to. Big GGIs, you can't do it yourself. That's just not possible.
No, we actually have a log, I think, Court, right? Then we have, thanks.
Yes, they have a log they have to keep up in their facility of who did it, when they did it, kind of like what a manifest, we would get from a pumper themselves.
Awesome, thank you. I think that was the last of the questions that have been popping in during the presentation. Have you had issues with pumpers not pumping completely? And if so, how do you handle pumpers not maintaining compliance with your agreement? Are they taken off the list?
So yes, the pumpers that, if we run into that issue, then yes, we will approach them directly. We will let them know, because it could be that the owner of the pumping company might not know that this particular field pumper is, not doing a good enough job. And so we want to allow them the time to self-correct. If it becomes a major issue, though, they will be removed.
And then how has the reception been from the pumpers? What percentage have opted out?
So far we have two pumpers that are either in the program or working through the program. And they honestly are ones that cover most of the restaurants anyway. So that's fantastic for us. The other ones, I've reached out a little bit, but haven't had a ton of response. It's like I said, it's super new. We just launched it in July. And so we've only been doing a couple months, truthfully. Beginning of next year, I'm going to do a little more hands-on, reach out, try and get more people involved. But kind of wanted to work through the kinks first before really going for the outreach push.
I was also kind of interested to see, are we going to get approached, too, after our initial outreach, and we sent another, reminder, hey, we're here, this program exists, and that kind of thing. Kind of interested to see as we move through, especially with the second pumper evaluation. We'll have 2 on the roll right now, and could just kind of see how it goes in the environment out there.
It'll be interesting to see if some business goes more to the preferred pumpers, and that's when the other ones are like, hey, I'm losing business and want to be on it. Somebody asked, how many grease haulers do you have?
So we have approximately 12, but really 4 or 5 are kind of the main pumpers, and the 2 we have are honestly the biggest of them. We have, the little mom and pop type pumpers that they're kind of hard to reach in general, but a dozen or so, I'll say.
And then Ronnie wanted to know if you could provide a list of pumpers currently in your program. That would probably be an email between you two.
Yeah. I can definitely, I can send you that info.
Gotcha. And then Jose, you've got your hand up if you want to unmute and ask a question.
So I worked on a program similar to this. We're trying to get it off the ground, and I just wanted to know, because we started with the restaurants and the pumpers, like we're trying to pitch it to both, and we had a lot of like pushback from the restaurants because they felt like it was just too involved. Was it easier for you guys? Did you just go straight towards the pumpers and not kind of like count the restaurants out, and like were they an afterthought, or how did that work for you guys?
The restaurants aren't an afterthought. It's more of a pushing what the benefit to the restaurant is. Basically, that we're entitled to know that information anyway. They have to provide it for us to begin with. But if they can get a quality pumping while still giving us that information, it's a huge benefit to them. And I haven't received any restaurant pushback at all, honestly.
Okay, maybe afterthought was the wrong word to use, but like it just seems like you guys have more success convincing the pumpers to actually do it. And like I said, we had a lot of pushback, and maybe it's because of our area that we were working in. We had a lot of mom and pop shop restaurants, and like you said, technology scares a lot of people. So I was just wondering, like, how did you attack that challenge?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that, Corey. Yeah, a lot of this came from our experience as inspectors. When we're talking to the folks who are working at the restaurant, a lot of the times they're not the decision makers. They're not holding the purse. They're the assistant manager running the restaurant. So in order to navigate our way to the decision makers, or the folks who are gonna contract different vendors, we could tell right away that was going to be cumbersome. So as Courtney's first slide suggested, why talk to 4,000 restaurants when you can talk to a dozen pumpers that cover those 4,000 restaurants?
Thank you.
We have a question in the chat. Do you have experience with pumpers that are grease harvesters? They will lowball their cost and pump only the grease and not completely empty the interceptor.
Yes and no. So directly, we anticipate that yes, this is happening. We don't allow it, obviously, but pumpers that are on the program, they know that's not allowed. They need to pump the thing in its entirety. Those smaller, almost mom and pop pumpers, I'm sure it happens. We're hoping to get it to the point where everyone is more aware of what the actual ordinance states, because if we do run into that, we'll go directly to that pumper and say, hey, this isn't okay.
And actually, and Court, I have a feeling, that we do have a pumper in our area that may not be, following the ordinance, the way they are supposed to, and they've shown the least interest in being part of this alliance. So, I think, because we have this standard where, not only are we going to go through the 6-month evaluation, but as you're giving us these monthly reports, we're going to go and check, someplace that you allegedly, just pumped. Do a regular inspection, and do 2 inspections basically in one. Is the restaurant itself, is everything connected to the grease interceptor that should be? And then the pumper that we know should have been there recently. So we kind of get 2 things done at once.
And then I'm also hoping that, through the program, that the restaurants can see the benefit of using a preferred pumper, because if we can get them away from someone who's not pumping properly and getting a better clean, then hopefully we all win.
Sounds great. Dave, you want to ask your question?
Well, yeah, I have a whole bunch, so maybe I'll just call up Courtney and ask her. But I think one of the big ones, and Jason, I got to call you anyway. One of the big ones is we've been trying to start something here, and we've been going right to the pumpers, and they've been pretty good, most of them, except for the real small ones, about sending us monthly everybody they've pumped in our city. So my question is, are you kind of waiving the records being kept on site if you get the info from the pumper?
Truthfully, yes, because then we have the records in our system. So why would they need to keep
it
it on
them,
site?
you're good. Yeah, because that's the
Yeah,
big
absolutely.
thing.
That's
They
one of the
never have them on
benefits.
site.
Yeah, it's one of the benefits to the program is what Courtney said. We're constant, the chain restaurants, they don't have them. And even, some of the other ones, they just, the pumpers through the night too, they stick the manifest or the receipt on the door or whatever, and it's gone, it's literally gone. So this really helps in that part as well.
Cool. Thank you. Great presentation.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chief. I think one last question before we move on. To enforce the haulers, do you use an agreement or an ordinance?
A little of both, kind of. I mean, the ordinance states, what our cleaning standards are, and through
there's nothing different. That was one of the things that made it easy for us, is because the grease management program, all of those elements were already in our ordinance. So, basically, if you're violating, the PPP program, you're violating the ordinance, as well. So, if we go beyond, just getting kicked out of the PPP program, we're definitely going to use the ordinance.
Well, thank you both for your excellent presentation and good discussion. I think everybody really enjoyed this. So thank you both for submitting your abstract and doing the presentation and for your time.
Yeah, thank you guys.
All right. With that, the next presentation is actually a video recording. Unfortunately, Paul Hendricks couldn't make it for the slot today. He is with EUSI, and he is going to speak about the high performance habits. So let me share. And there you go.
Hello, everyone. This is Paul Hendricks. Today, I'm going to share with you some information that I came across when I was developing an article for AZ Water. I write an article, Success and Fun, and today I'm going to talk about high performance habits, which are from a book written by Brenton Bouchard. In the back of his book, he has a summary of 3 personal habits and 3 social habits, which will help you be extraordinary. I want to share those with you today. The first one, personal habit, is seek clarity. Habit 2 is generate energy. Habit 3 is raise necessity. Social habit 4 is increase productivity. Habit 5 is develop influence. Habit 6 is demonstrate courage. So today I'll go through each one of those. Habit 1, seek clarity. You should envision the future. Set clear intentions for who you want to be each day, how you want to interact with each other, and what skills you must develop to win in the future, and how you can make a difference to serve with excellence. Never enter a situation without thinking through these 4 categories: the category of self, of social, of skills, and most importantly, the category of service. Determine the feeling that you want each day and ask yourself frequently, what is the primary feeling I want to bring to this situation? What is the primary feeling that you want to get from this situation? Choose and cultivate the feelings that you wish to consistently experience and share with others in your life. Define what is meaningful to you. Not everything that is achievable is important, and so achievement is not the issue. Alignment is the issue. Look to upcoming months and projects in your future. Determine what might bring you enthusiasm, connection, and satisfaction, and then spend more time in those areas. Always be asking, how can I make this effort personally meaningful to me? Because when you do that, you'll have a higher commitment to excellence. Habit 2 is how do you generate energy? release tension, and stay intent on your objective. You should use transition between activities to renew your energy level. You could close your eyes, practice deep breathing, release tension in your body. Find a place where you can get off by yourself and do this frequently throughout the day. On high stress days, high tension days, maybe every hour even. Once you feel tension lift, set a clear intention for your next activity, open your eyes, and get to work with vibrant focus. The next thing is to bring joy to others. Be responsible for the energy you bring to your day and to each situation in your life. Focus especially on bringing joy to others and to your activities. Anticipate positive outcomes from your actions. Ask yourself questions that generate positive emotions. Set triggers to remind you to be positive and grateful. Especially appreciate the small things and the people around you, because there aren't many big things in life when you really think about it, and the people around you are the most important for that moment. Optimize health. In the demands of our lives today, we require you to learn quickly, deal with stress, be alert, pay attention, and remember important things, and keep a positive mode of thinking. In order to do this, you need to take sleep, exercise, and nutrition more seriously. We've all heard about this, but you already know the things that you should be doing. So you need to do them. And have an accountability partner that can help you stay on track with having the right amount of sleep, be diligent about meaningful exercise, and take nutrition more seriously. Habit 3 is raise necessity. Know who needs your A game today. You can't become extraordinary without a sense that it's absolutely necessary to excel for yourself and for others in your team. From now on, whenever you sit down at your desk, ask yourself, who needs my A game the most right now? What about my identity and external obligations? And how do I really deal with them today and keep them as an imperative? We need to affirm our why. When you verbalize something, it becomes more real and important to you. You need to speak your why to yourself out loud and often, and share it with others. Live in congruence with your own commitments. The next time you want to increase your performance, necessity, declare to yourself and others what you want and why you want it and when you want it. And that will help you stay on track. Level up your squad. The motion and excellence are contagious. So spend more time with the most positive and successful people in your peer group. Continue building your ideal network of supportive and empowering people. Ask them, how can I work with you? Ask yourself, how can I work with the best people as I embark on this next project? Ask them, how can I inspire you? Ask yourself, how can I inspire others to raise their standard of performance? Habit 4 is a social habit. Increase productivity. Increase the outputs that matter. Determine the outputs that matter the most in determining your success, differentiation, and contribution to your field of industry or your project. This can be at your work, or it can be in your family and personal life. Focus there. So look at those how to increase your outputs and what is important, what matters the most, and focus on those. Say no to almost everything else and be prolific in creating those outputs with high standards of quality. There was a shoe company that coined a phrase, just do it. I think the phrase that we need is just say no to most everything else and focus on what really matters. Remember that the main thing is to keep the main thing your main thing. There are so many distractions in our life nowadays, it is very hard to stay focused on the main thing. Chart your 5 moves. If there are only 5 major moves to make a goal happen, what would they be? Think of each major move as a big bucket of activities in a project. Break projects down into deliverables, deadlines, and activities. Every time you complete one of those specific things, you get a little burst of energy. So don't wait until the entire project is done to get a burst of energy. If you've broken it down into small deliverables, deadlines, and activities, each time you accomplish one of those, you can check it off and you'll get a burst of energy. Once you're clear on these things, put them into your calendar and schedule the bulk of your time to work and focus on them. Get insanely good at key skills. Determine the 5 major skills you need to develop over the next 3 years to grow into the person you hope to become. Set out to develop those skills with obsessive focus through the 10 steps of progressive mastery. The most important thing is to always be developing the critical skills to your future success. Habit number 5, develop influence. Teach people how to think. In every situation of influence, prepared by asking yourself, how do you want other people to think about themselves, about other people, about the world at large, about your project or activity that's primary to your next step. Communicate how you want other people to think consistently. Shape people's thinking by saying things like, think of it this way. Or ask, what do you think about? Or ask, what would happen if we tried thus and so? Challenge people to grow by having them respond to these open-ended type questions. Observe people's character, connections, and contributions, and actively challenge them to do all those things. Ask people if they gave their all, if they could be treating those around them better, if they could give even more to serve with greater excellence and distinction. The former Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, asked a young speechwriter to write a speech for him, and the person who worked on it brought it into his desk and said, Dr. Kissinger, here's your speech. The doctor looked over his nose and his glasses at the young aide and said, is this the best you can do? He kind of dropped his head and said, no, doctor, it isn't. So he gave it back to him. Did this several times, and Dr. Kissinger hadn't even read it. The last time the young assistant brought it in, the doctor said to him, is this the best you can do? And he said, yes, doctor, it's the best I can do. He said, thank you very much. He accepted it, and it went on from there. So I ask people to do their best, and many times they will. Be a role model and model the kind of performance that you hope others will emulate. 71% of high performance people say they think about being a role model on a daily basis, being a good role model for their family, for their team, and the greater community. Ask yourself, how can I handle this situation in a way that will inspire others to believe in themselves, be their best, and serve others with integrity, heart, and excellence. Habit 6, demonstrate courage. Honor the struggle. Embrace the process. As I get older, I realize that the reward is the process, many times much more than the goal or the final completion of an effort. When you have the opportunity to learn and serve, don't complain about the effort involved. View this struggle as a necessity, important, and positive part of your journey so that you can find true peace and personal power. Don't bemoan the inevitable hardship of self-improvement and of chasing your dreams. Have reverence for the challenge. So embrace the process, savor it, and enjoy it as you go. And then when you accomplish the goal, the reward will even be sweeter. Share your truth and ambition with others. The main motivation of humankind is to be free, to express our true selves, and to pursue our dreams without restriction, and to experience what may be called personal freedom. Follow this impulse by consistently sharing your true thoughts, feelings, needs, and dreams with other people on your team and in your personal life. Live your truth. So, find someone or something to fight for. We need a noble cause. High performers tend to make that cause critical part of their life. In doing something for others, you'll find your reason for courage and your cause for focus and excellence. There are 2 suggestions you can do right now to break through today. One is to go online at www.highperformanceindicator.com and take a free assessment that Mr. Bouchard offers as part of High Performance Habits. You could also go and purchase his book, read it and apply it. Each of us can apply these principles to our daily lives. You'll be amazed as you apply these thoughts and principles at work and at home. Please share them with others and see what happens. I'm honored to share my perspective in this, and I look forward to hearing success stories from all of you. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
All right, so next up on our list is Amy Gamouche from the Western Environmental Equipment, which is another one of our sponsors. Amy, if you're on the line, you can go ahead and video or any slides you have, then you can have your time slot.
Good morning, everyone. I'm hoping everyone can hear me. I'm going to share my screen real quick. My name is Amy Gamouche. I own Western Environmental Equipment Company. Many of you are familiar with us. I apologize, I don't have slides today. I just wanted to give a quick hello to everyone. We have a new website now. It is weeci.com. I'm hoping you can see it on your screen. If you go under our technologies page, you can see we are a wastewater and water manufacturer's rep, and our primary item that we rep that you'll be familiar with is probably Teledyne ISCO samplers and flow meters. We have Tracom flumes and enclosures. Many of you also use mission communication cell phone modems along with your SIUs. I also wanted to just get out there today that we are a digital analysis rep. So we do skid packaged neutralization system solution for your customers. And in the last year, we've also become the Badger meter rep. So those are a couple of things of interest for you. I just wanted to mention in the last 18 months, a couple of the private utilities have started to require their permitted dischargers to actually measure real-time COD, TSS, pH, conductivity. We can help you out with that as well via SCAN. And so I just wanted to make sure to say hello to everyone. You can, if you don't have our contact information on the website, is a contact us section. All those inquiries come directly to us and we can reach out to you. If you know how to contact us and you need any help from us, we're more than happy to offer support. One of the benefits we also do is if you give out our cards along with several others to your industrial users that need help, we go out and do a site survey and help do a solution for your customers at no charge. So I knew I was going to be short and sweet. And so there is another vendor who is also sponsoring today, and he actually gave up his time slot because he didn't have anyone to hit start. So I know how important it is for you guys to keep your time. So I am also going to hit play right now. I'm going to reshare my screen here to show a short video about Mihal contracting. If you can hang on just a second. Can everyone see that screen?
Yeah, I can see a video screening. Make sure you hit share computer audio when you share, otherwise we won't hear it.
Okay, hang on just a second. Let me see. Give control. I laugh when I say we are very highly technical when it comes to flow monitoring and sampling, but when it comes to Teams and Google, I'm not highly. Oh, include computer sound. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit play now for this short video.
What's Mihal contracting?
What is Mihal contracting?
What is Mihal? What is Mihal contracting?
What does Mihal contracting do?
What is Mihal contracting?
Mihal Contracting is a general contractor and wastewater service company. We self-perform the installation of pretreatment systems, including lift stations, grease traps, and holding tanks. We also work on compliance points for the cities, including metering manholes, bolts, and flumes. Along with all of that, we also perform pH and flow measurement equipment. Once the equipment is in place, Mihal Contracting has 10 technicians that are skillfully trained to provide services ranging from daily cleaning to preventative maintenance to monthly calibrations and even after-hour service calls in order to keep the systems and facilities operational. Mihal's technicians are on call after hours and even on the weekends to accommodate the emergency unexpected needs of these systems. Mihal also performs the required routine wastewater sampling and prepares our clients monthly SMRs that they can deliver to the city. Mihal has been trained at ISCO headquarters to service and repair all ISCO samplers. We do it right here in-house. The Mihal contracting team is trained to be in confined space and has installed over 100 flow measuring devices for both public and private use. Mihal Contracting performs dye studies as well. This helps assist companies in locating sewer lines in facilities that do not have accurate plans. We also frequently work with engineers upfront on the design phase to ensure proper equipment and layout to simplify the ongoing operations and maintenance services. We are the backbone to the Valley's water treatment and work diligently to ensure quality and instill peace of mind for our customers and their systems. Don't believe us? Take a look for yourself.
What's Mihal Contracting?
So I just want to say thank you to everybody for this time. And like I said, if you have any questions, you can reach us at wiki.com, and you can reach Mihal Contracting at mihalcontracting.com, and drop us a line if you need any help from us or you have any clients who need any help from us. And thank you again. Have a good conference.
Thank you, Amy, for being a sponsor again, and thanks for your short little presentation. So we are on to our last presenter of the day. It is Fats, Oils, and Grease Reduction by Douglas Fagan.
Almost.
Okay. So Doug is a growth-focused entrepreneur and a co-owner of InPipe Technology, having purchased the business in 2017. Prior to that, he had a number of senior corporate leadership roles in sales, marketing, strategy, operations, product management, and consulting. Doug received his BA from the George Washington University and his MBA from Northwestern University's Kellogg Graduate School of Management. So thank you, Doug, and take it away.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much, Jolene. Appreciate it. Let me share my screen here real quick. And then we'll go here. I'm just going to share the whole screen. Let's do this. Perfect. All right, everyone can see that.
Yep, I see your PowerPoint.
Great. Thanks so much. All right, so really appreciate it. Again, my name is Doug Fagans.